Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. I am your host, John DeLynn. I am here with my brilliant partner, Margie. Hey, Margie.
Hey, good morning.
It's January 12th, 2024. Happy New Year. Today, we are here to share with you an amazing new book that we believe is going to be as important, if not more important, than the CES letter. I think it should be a companion to the CES letter. I'm going to call Jeremy Reynolds and say, Jeremy, let's bundle this book with the CES letter. The book is called How to Leave the Mormon Church. It was released yesterday, January 11th, 2024. And you can click on the description to purchase a copy. But this is a book written by Alyssa Grenfell. Hey, Alyssa, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me back.
Yeah. And I wrote an introduction to a foreword to this book, but it's sort of a how-to manual for people young and old and in between to sort of have a bit of an intro guide to leaving the Mormon Church. We did a 3-ish hour story with Alyssa yesterday, talking about her Mormon story and how super Orthodox, faithful, return missionary, temple married, temple working, a Mormon wife who happens to be a millennial. Why would she ever, of all people, lose her Mormon faith? And then how did she deal with the aftermath? And that was yesterday's episode. We recommend that you pause today, go back and watch that, and then come back to get the full effect of today's episode. But you don't have to do that. Today, we asked Alyssa in this 2-part series to come up with her top 10 suggestions for navigating a faith crisis / leaving the Mormon Church. And that's what we're going to be covering today. Again, please buy this book right now. Let's make it an international bestseller. Not just because that would be cool, but because this book will help you. It will also help your loved ones. So please get it. And I promise you won't regret it. It's in hardback form, paperback form, and on the Kindle ebook form. And she's going to work on an audio version. And if I know Alyssa, that means she'll have it ready by later this afternoon. Okay. So Alyssa, how have you felt since yesterday's episode? It's already gotten like 25,000 views, which is really, really good for 12 hours. But how are you feeling about yesterday?
Yeah, it was very intense. I didn't expect how hard it is to talk about so many personal stories for, and tell your whole story. So it was really challenging, but it was also really cool. And I think reading the comments of the YouTube video already and seeing people be so supportive and so having so many people share that they've purchased the book. I woke up this morning and it has a little badge in the Amazon store that it's the #1 new release in Mormonism, which is very funny because I'm currently reading the Book of Mormon, which I know most people just get that from the missionaries, but I like to imagine that me as an author is outranking Joseph Smith, the author. So very excited to just see that this book is connecting with people, that they're interested in it, and that they're willing to see if it's going to help them too. So thank you for having me on.
And I just love, one of the biggest, we all know that the Mormon Church doesn't set women up sometimes in their strongest position if they happen to leave the church and or get divorced from the church. And so many Mormon women end up just after their faith crisis saying, what can I do with my life now that the motherhood purpose isn't the only purpose of my life anymore? Now that I don't have the church providing me meaning, what do I even do with my life? I love your story, kind of the meta structure of your story, as what one Mormon mother and wife and human chooses to do as a way to turn the lemon, so to speak, into lemonade. I love that.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to leave and feel that you've kind of quashed any part of your identity that falls outside of the mom and wife categories. And when I first got married on my wedding day, another member of the church actually told me that I should feel really happy because my wedding day is the most beautiful I'll ever be. On the day of my wedding, this is the most beautiful you'll ever be. This is the happiest you'll ever be. It was a woman. and you should just really cherish today. And she basically was...
It's all downhill from there.
Nothing says it's all downhill from here. Like, today's the best day of your life. And so I am so excited to be on this podcast. It's really a dream come true to publish my book and to prove her and Mormonism wrong, that my wedding day was beautiful, but it wasn't the only most beautiful day of my life. I get lots of most beautiful days of my life. So thank you for having me here. It's really, really, like I said, a dream come true.
It's our pleasure. Okay, so you had a wardrobe decision that you wanted to make, and I thought it would be empowering for you to discuss that and make that decision explicitly and overtly, because I'm not the subtlest of humans, so I push that onto my guests.
Okay. Yes. Before we started going on the live and recording, as I was planning what I was going to wear for this podcast, I wanted to wear a tank top. If you're watching or if you're listening, I'm wearing a tank top and a kind of an overshirt. So I brought the tank top, but I also brought the overshirt because I knew that I was going to feel kind of anxious about this tank top decision, and I wasn't sure I was going to basically be courageous enough to wear the tank top. And so I have this overshirt, I have the tank top, and before we started recording, I explained to these two that I was going to take the overshirt off and commit to the tank top because it's a bit of an advertisement, in my opinion, for this book, because wearing something like this is still difficult for me, especially online, especially on a video. And so before we started, I took the overshirt off and I explained, okay, I'm going to be brave. And they both, John especially, said, let's wait and let's explain. So get ready for the big reveal. It's the big tank top reveal.
It's so relatable, Alyssa, really.
The porn shoulders, as they say. And
this is deconditioning as in process.
So, and I also, the reason I chose this tank top is I feel like I really like... I kind of like subverting expectations too, because I like the pearls and the pearl earrings because it feels like it adds a level of class to an unclassy outfit. Mormonism would consider this unclassy. So I kind of like the convergence of the class with the lack of class. So that's why I chose this. And thank you guys for pumping me up to have the courage to wear a tank top, which a lot of people have no question doing, but for someone out of the church for 8 years, I still get a little self-conscious. So that's the story.
Well, the feedback coming in is really great. Analyzing Mormonism says, Alyssa, you look gorgeous. Let's see. Falk Castell says, wow, you look so classy with it. S.L. Connolly says you look great. So people are very supportive and affirming.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So I wanted to just begin with one super tiny disclaimer. At the very beginning of Mormon Stories podcast, I had to figure out what we wanted Mormon Stories podcast to be about. And at the time, I was still in the church before they excommunicated me, but I still had to think about whether we were ever going to be taking the position about whether people should stay or leave the church. And I just want to say something that I said yesterday, which is, it is not the Mormon Stories podcast position that people should stay in the Mormon church or leave the Mormon church. That's something that we believe is a super personal decision. And I just want to make sure that people know that by having Alyssa on, by promoting this book, and by titling the episode in this way, I just want to be clear. I don't think it's ethical to tell people they should leave or do anything. I believe everybody, if there's anything we've learned from Mormonism, is that people should be guided by their own inner compass. And so we believe there are valid reasons to stay. There are valid reasons to leave. And so this is about providing people with wisdom and tools if they make the decision that they need to leave. And I think this exact issue is going to be one of the bullet points that we talk about today. Is that right?
Yes. And the book, I don't think anyone's going to likely purchase this book if they're very committed to the church. The title sets it as something that if you're an active member of the church, you're going to be disinterested in. So the first chapter picks up at the moment of the faith crisis. So it assumes someone has had a faith crisis and is actively dealing with the faith crisis. It's not a book that is aimed at, here's all the reasons why you should no longer believe in Mormonism. I think a lot of literature already addresses that subject. This is meant more to help you pick up the pieces once they're already on the ground. So it's, and also to echo, it does not encourage people to leave so much as helps them think through the thought process of, if I've lost my faith, should I then leave the church?
Right.
Yeah. And I'll add that if there's anyone out there who's written a really good book on, I mean, I wrote an 80-page internet essay on how to stay in the church after a crisis of faith. Maybe we should do that podcast sometime. But if there's anyone out there who's written a high-quality book on how to stay in the church after losing your faith, I would love to interview them too. Okay, so today we're going to be covering your top 10 tips on how to leave the Mormon Church. Is that right?
Yes.
And let's read all 10 to start with, just so people know what we're going to be covering.
Okay.
And then we'll go into it. So what are the 10 you chose?
So the 10 I chose, the first is not a tip so much as explain the intro, the how, and the why of the book. So that's the first one. The second is learning to trust yourself over someone in authority or an organization in authority, and not even trusting me as the author, but practicing truly trusting yourself, the reader. Number 3 is how to decide if you should stay in the church or leave after you've lost your faith. Number 4 is strategies and approaches to coming out to family and friends, and covers anything from your parents to your children to a spouse to friends, to ward members. Number 5 is slow and steady wins the race. So talking about how once you lose your testimony, once you lose your faith, how to ensure that you're not immediately going off and kind of burning down your life or making really quick, really drastic choices in your personal life, but slowing down and being considerate. Number 6 is sex and sexuality, how to learn about yourself as a sexual being, how to destigmatize things like pornography, masturbation. Number 7 is substances, from coffee to cocktails to cannabis to psychedelics, and how to be careful and considerate and understand the risks of substance use. And number 8 is identity, how to reconstruct and rebuild your identity as a post-Mormon, ex-Mormon, no longer Mormon person, how to figure out what you are as a nun, no longer Mormon. Number 9 is building a new life and community outside the confines of Mormonism, how to reconnect back into a community of people who support you and love you. And number 10 is becoming an ex-ExMormon, how to not just leave Mormonism behind, but if you're ready, to leave ex-Mormonism or post-Mormonism behind as well, and to live your life outside of this kind of hyper-fixated state all of us go through in the process of leaving the church.
Love it.
Beautiful.
All right. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so let's jump into number 1.
Okay, and for number 1, you already explained a little bit of what I wanted to talk about first, which is just that I feel like after I finished the CES letter, after I lost my testimony, I really wanted and needed resources that I could go to for all of these moments that you have to confront after you leave the church, and ask, what should I do here? As an example, my husband, after we left, expressed he was curious about weed, cannabis, and it's so mind-bending that someone you married in the temple across from the altar would ever ask you that question. And so I really wanted a safe space to go and explore topically. I really loved binging podcasts. I looked at the Ex-Mormon subreddit, but I felt like there was a need for a compiling of every single topic that you might face or have a question about and put it in a book. So this allows the reader to pick up the book and, like a true guide, not read it from cover to cover, but go to these certain sections and say, I'm really struggling with my sexuality. Let me go read that chapter and see some ideas from this person that has also faced this and see what they have to say. So it kind of picks up, I think, where the CES letter leaves you and buoys you back up to begin to think about these different aspects of your life that are now left in question by leaving the church.
And I'll just add, I'm friends with Jeremy. He just reached out to me last week, but when Jeremy wrote the CS letter, his intent was to write a book called What's Next? But life happened and he decided, I think, not to write that book. So he kind of envisioned this book. So you're the fulfillment of Jeremy Runnels' prophecy, basically.
Wow, very cool.
Vision, his vision.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's very common. I spend a lot of time still on the Ex-Mormon subreddit, and I see almost every day there's at least one person posting, I just lost my faith, what do I do? And I think a lot of people come into the Ex-Mormon space not with a need of, hey, can you help me deconstruct my faith? I'm questioning, but having questioned, looking for support and understanding and community. So a lot of people don't need more resources, or there are already abundant resources for history, morality, questions surrounding ethics of the church. But I think I just saw a need of people need more resources that are comprehensive and cover many topics to help them figure out and make their way into this new world that they're facing.
Yeah. Okay. So
the way I got the idea for this book is I left when I was 23. I left, I would say, before any of my friends. I didn't know anyone except for my sister who had left the church. And when I left, I had a lot of friends and a lot of acquaintances. And keep in mind, I went to BYU, I served a mission. Most of my friends were Mormon, and a lot of them stopped talking to me. They maybe reached out and said, hey, I'm sorry you're going through this, but they ultimately, we stopped speaking. And I think that this became the thorn in our relationship that we couldn't overcome. And then a lot of people in the last, I left about 8 years ago, in the last 8 years have since left. So a lot of the people who at one point very understandably said, I don't know if I can continue being friends with you because of this thing that you've left the church, or I feel very sorry for you, or I pity you, or how sad, reached back out and said, hey, I am now really struggling with my faith. And a lot of times it was just acquaintances, like another MTC teacher, another mission companion or person from my mission who I was never companions with. And I recognize to some extent, if you're going through a faith crisis, and it just shows, I think, how lonely it is. Because to reach out through the internet to a very old acquaintance shows you're probably not able to talk to your family. You're probably not able to talk to your close friends because it's not a safe space. And so for them to reach back out to me was great to reconnect, and I loved hearing their stories, but I also think showed a need that people need opportunities to ask these questions, to talk through these topics in a really safe space that they feel they'll receive no judgment. And a lot of them, when they would reach back out to me, I actually started an album in my phone of screenshots of all these conversations. And I have over 30 people who were from my life across time who have reached out to me from my old wards, from BYU, from my mission, who just said, hey, I'm now struggling with my faith. I know you left the church. Can we have a phone call together so I can just talk to you? And when I would talk to them, a lot of the same questions would come up. How did you tell your parents? How did you try coffee for the first time? How did you get over the guilt associated with having a glass of wine? And all of these same questions led me to realize that there was just a need for this sort of literature.
Speaking of your sister, Carolee, we were having dinner last night. You weren't even comfortable reaching out to your sister, who you knew had already left. Isn't that mind-blowing?
Yeah. She had been out. She left about a year or so before me, and I felt like even though she was already out, I didn't want to taint my leaving by confiding in her, because I felt like it would be used as ammunition against me. Mm-hmm. Oh, you told your sister, she sent you anti-Mormon literature, she convinced you to leave.
The Carolee would be blamed.
Yes,
for
that she
what
would be,
happened to you.
not just that she would be blamed for me leaving, but that I would not get to claim it for my own.
Oh,
that's
even better.
That
Yeah.
my
Your
own
journey,
journey would no longer belong to me as a result of leaving the church. So I think I had a really strong sense that I wanted my own story to be my own story and my own choice to be my own choice, versus having the people around me start pointing at the other elements that might have darkened my path, like I had no brain of my own or agency of my own or thoughts of my own.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. Okay. Yeah. So I was talking to, for those of you who are watching in January of 2024, there's a Mormon bishop who recently resigned from being a bishop on the pulpit, over the pulpit, and it was recorded. And I was talking to him, and he's just like, where have all the ward members gone? Like, I've been their bishop, and like, it seems like everyone's disappeared from my life almost immediately. And he was just in shock that you lose
flip.
almost everyone who's Mormon, basically.
Yeah.
Sometimes and often family members.
Yeah, I think members who leave are positioned as poison. Like, we become poison. I think a lot of members, I do believe members have good hearts, but I think they think that by continuing to associate with people who have left, they will be poisoned too. And so I don't think, like, I've heard that Jehovah's Witnesses, they have a full outline for disfellowshipping. Mormonism, you don't really talk about disfellowshipping, but it definitely happens. And it's not something where someone says from the pulpit, the edict is we will disfellowship this family, but it's a very unspoken rule of Mormonism that if somebody leaves, they are disfellowshipped.
And I mean, technically, the Mormon Church disfellowships people all the time overtly. It's a way of putting a member's status on probation.
Yeah.
Tell me if what you mean is shunning.
Yeah,
because
I
Jehovah's
would
Witnesses
say,
and Scientologists do this hard shunning, but what I often call it in Mormonism is soft shunning. Because they may not say, I'll never speak to you again. That would be too overtly aggressive
Rude.
for a Mormon.
Yeah.
But they may take you out of a text string. They may stop inviting you to things.
Yeah.
They may not want you around their children anymore. And in that way, it's soft shunning.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely. Yeah, I think that's a good word for it. No, perhaps there's never a conversation that is very explicit about this, but it happens to everyone, I think. And then it's really cool and feels healing in a way when a lot of those people who did the soft shunning come back around and have even told me, hey, because when I left, I also I put a big post on Facebook about how I was leaving, and I'll talk about that in one of the other points. But so that was very public, and in the same way, I wanted to control my own story and say, I'm leaving. I'm not leaving because I want to sin. I'm not leaving because I had even had friends who would post a picture of them in a bikini, and when I was still active, everyone would get together and gossip about them and say, oh, she's falling away. This narrative of falling away, of being tempted to sin was so potent that before I would post a single picture of me with a coffee cup, I was going to post a very decisive, I guess, manifesto of my lack of faith or disbelief, so that it was clear I am leaving because I no longer believe in the truth claims of the Mormon Church. I am leaving because I no longer believe that this is truth. I am not leaving for all these other lies.
For a bikini or
because I want to wear a bikini.
Or
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like you would throw your eternal salvation away for a beer. You know what I mean? Or a little weed. Like people, it's so silly.
I served a 1.5 long mission. I paid to serve, and I was very faithful. And yet now the idea of a morning cup of coffee is so powerful. There's no way that I can resist the temptation. It's very ridiculous, but people believe it.
And many Mormons can't tease out the difference between, I decided it was no longer true, and so I drink coffee because why not? Versus, oh, see, they're drinking coffee. That must be the slippery slope that led them out of the church, right?
Yes.
They can't tease out those differences.
Cause versus correlation.
Correlation versus causation, yeah, that's right.
Yes. And I also, I think, too, the book takes what is ex-Mormonism, which is often a really angry and harsh and lonely space, and trying to reframe it in the book to be, yes, painful, but also a beautiful opportunity to learn about yourself in a really fresh, eyes wide open sort of way. And to take nothing for granted, and to take nothing at its word, and to have this new frame of mind, almost like if you've ever seen those videos or those videos of colorblind kids putting on the colorblind glasses and they're seeing color for the first time and they just start to cry. That's how I felt after I left the church. Sorry.
Or like when they turn on the cochlear implants and people can hear for
and
the first
the
time.
babies get to hear the moms and dads' voices for the first time.
Yeah.
And they're so beautiful to just see. It's also the Truman Show. He walks out, seeing instead of this as a terrible loss, instead as putting the glasses on that let you see color for the first time. And that leaving the church is horrible and awful and lonely, but it is also putting those glasses on and realizing how much you've been missing or cutting out of your life in the name of Mormonism.
Have you seen Pleasantville, the movie Pleasantville?
I haven't.
So I have a list, Margie and I have a list of like faith crisis movies, Truman Show, The Matrix, Tangled, Smallfoot. There's a bunch of really good ones, but one of them is Pleasantville. Oh, The Village. Did I say The Village?
Not yet.
The Village is
I haven't
amazing.
seen that one.
But Tangled, sorry,
Pleasantville.
the movie starts out in black and white. And then when one woman sort of awakens to her own inner voice, she turns color and the rest of the movie is still black and white. And then slowly her turning color leads to other people turning color as well. So there's actually a movie that literally reflects what you're talking about. Check it out. I think you'll find value
I'll
in
add it to my list.
Pleasantville. Yeah.
I think, too, in the book, I just made it, as I said, a true topical guide. You can flip around, you can read a section, you can skip a section. And I think as a member, it's very important to be confronted with, or as a person who's leaving, to be confronted with information that makes you uncomfortable and to ask, why does that make me uncomfortable? Like to say to a person who's recently left, pornography is okay, is very triggering. Like can be for a lot of people really, really difficult to hear. Or you're not a bad person if you smoke weed.
Yeah.
Or if you show your shoulders, you're still a good person and you should try it. Like those ideas can feel dangerous as you're freshly leaving the church because you've been so trained to believe that those things are sinful that even reading that, even hearing someone express that feels dangerous, feels worrisome or anxiety inducing. And so I think even if you don't do anything from this book, I think confronting the idea of maybe you should try gambling, maybe you should try going to Vegas and having a fun night, don't blow all your money, but maybe just try it, see if you like it, see if it's fun, see if you can have fun responsibly if you're interested. And even if you choose not to do that, which is fine, considering the feelings and considering what bubbles up in your brain when you're confronted with that suggestion helps you understand more about yourself. And if you're triggered or if you feel, I would never have a night in Vegas because it's bad, to question, why is it bad? Is it bad because I personally think that that's a waste of time and potentially dangerous or unhealthy? Or is it bad because I've been told that's bad my whole life, and so unquestioningly, I believe it's bad.
Yeah.
What I love about this is the value of turning inward. And you're actually giving prompts. Do you mind if I share a couple?
Yeah,
So
sure.
an
And that's going to
exam-
be point 2, by the way.
Oh, the prompts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Turning inward is point.
Yes. So that was
But
just.
still, make your point. I just want to
Yeah,
like,
the
be
point
sure.
being that throughout the book, this is you're clearly getting to know Alyssa. You're gaining information. But what I love about it is that it also is this exercise to turn inward. It's divided by subject. Here's like clothing. There are these little places where you reflect and write, and so. It will say, consider the following questions and reflect on your feelings. Note the feelings bubbling up at the prospect of swearing, gambling, throwing away your garments. So here are some example prompts, just so you get a feel for how thoughtful it is. How has the concept of sin influenced your decisions and actions in life? If you were to get a tattoo, piercing, or change your image in some way, what would it symbolize for you? How could this impact your self-image and confidence? What changes do you want to make as you redefine your image and appearance? So that's just an example of how interactive the book is and how the book actually prompts you to have this sense of exploration and connection with yourself.
Which I think does lead in perfectly to point number 2, which is learning to trust yourself over someone in authority. or over a church or over an organization.
Wait, well, really quickly, can you just show the book one time? Can you discuss the little door? Because we missed that in the
Yes,
in your
and
outline. Sorry.
I love. I had a fellow ex-Mormon actually design this for me, so thank you to him. So it's meant to just be a symbolize the Truman Show, which is one of my favorite ex-Mormon examples of the thought process and what it's like. So we have stairs, steps leading, and then out of the doorway is space and stars and a planet, and there's the same little symbol here on the spine, just to make it like I love the imagery of stepping up, becoming better, learning even the steps that are in the book to becoming more self-fulfilled, more self-actualized, and that through the doorway is not just a question mark, but is something awe-inspiring and beautiful.
And I also like, maybe you already said this, but the part one is for new ex-Mos, but part two is for anyone who's ever left. I wouldn't just say this church, but I'm already having people in the comments saying that they weren't Mormon, but they were part of another high demand religion, and they bought the book and are finding value in it. So I want to make sure. Yeah. And then I'll just say, I because you said you proposed the possibility that pornography is good. I know there's going to be people that write and say, you're saying pornography is good unqualifiedly, so I'm shutting off this podcast right now because pornography is evil. Do you want to, I know we're going to talk about sexuality later. Do you want to just quickly provide a disclaimer for that person that might be inclined to shut this off completely from just that statement?
Yeah, I think that there are so many aspects of pornography that are very problematic, like the question of consent, the question of violence against women, the question of being compensated for your creation or the film, or
portrayal.
How creators are compensated for this is often very disparate to how much money the people who post or have these. So there's a lot of questions about pornography that are like awful, that are truly should be something you consider. But I think that it's worthwhile to consider what aspects of pornography are damaging, are bad, are something that you should shy away from, and what aspects of it are worth engaging with or considering, or I think the question is, can you watch pornography ethically? And the question should not be pornography is point blank bad for everyone all the time, and if you watch it, you're an evil human being that you should hate yourself, versus can you watch pornography ethically? And some people might say absolutely not, and I think a lot of people that we know, it's the biggest industry in the world, do watch it. And so if you're going to watch it, how can you engage with this in an ethical way?
Nice. Okay, thanks.
That's my disclaimer.
All right.
That's my disclaimer.
And that's an example of how you show up in the book. I feel like you treat subjects like that. There's like a bit of an education piece or things to consider, or so that is the way the book is written as well.
Yeah, and this is something that a binary Orthodox religious worldview kind of can't understand. But like, what does it mean to just shut out any mention of masturbation, pornography, drug use, alcohol use, sex work, whatever the thing is? If a large percentage of people are doing it, how in the world
even Mormons.
Does it make, especially Mormons?
Yeah.
Some would say Mormons lead the United States per capita in porn use. Like there's Pornhub evidence to suggest that. So if something is such a reality, I talked to a bishop recently whose stake president took him on a psychedelic journey. So the stake president is saying, Bishop, let's go do psychedelics. Like if this swinging, I talked to a sex worker the other day discussing a possible podcast episode, and there's stake presidents and bishops visiting sex workers in Salt Lake Valley.
Yeah.
So like, and
some of the most repressed people are the most religious people, because I think religion creates an obsession within a person that makes something like pornography so much more alluring, because the idea that it's bad or that they can't have it makes it more compelling.
Right.
And that's why some of the places where there's the worst sexual assault are the places that religion is the most dominant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's fine if you want to shut something off just because the topic is raised. But given the prevalence of all these things, and even swinging non-monogamy, I know of stake presidents and bishops who are in the swinging communities secretly. And so you can shut something off just because the topic is raised. But given the prevalence of all these things, including psychedelics, if you want to live in a world where you're educated, and you can even if you're against all these things I just mentioned, you want to be able to navigate them as soon as your spouse or your kids or your loved ones, or you find out they're engaging in it, maybe stick around and don't just shut something off and listen about how to engage with these things responsibly. Sorry, I just had to add that.
No, thank you. And I think too, it's a very Mormon idea or Mormon principle that ideas themselves are sins or ideas themselves are dangerous, that by hearing information about drugs, it is almost as bad as participating in the drugs yourself. That hearing words, hearing the exchange of words, hearing a conversation is itself a sin. That's a very Mormon idea.
Yeah.
That the words out of someone's mouth are deeply dangerous and inherently sinful.
Yeah.
You can listen to people talk about a topic without engaging in the topic yourself. But if you want to engage in the topic, hearing and consuming information about it is going to help you do that responsibly.
Yeah.
And is going to help you do that in a very educated and informed consent kind of way.
Such a good point.
Yeah. Okay. Now on to point 2.
Point 2. So after I left, I wanted so desperately for people to tell me what to do. I just wanted someone to tell me what is the purpose of life. What should I be doing? I would ask anyone for advice, and if they gave me advice, if they were willing to say, you should do this, I would almost always listen to their advice. I was so mentally trained to look outward for affirmation that it was really hard when I left that I could no longer pray, I could no longer speak to a bishop, I could no longer go to the scriptures. I was so used to outsourcing my personal choice making to outside authority that the idea of having to, for the first time, make my own choices was really intimidating because I had never looked internally for direction. And so even after I was out of the church, I really struggled with the idea of I really wanted someone to just tell me what to do, just tell me who to be, just tell me what's good, like how to be a good person. And I think pining after authority, pining after someone to take over my life and tell me what to do, that feeling was really strong. And I think a lot of people, after they leave the church, look for another thought pattern, another church, another group, another organization.
Another guru.
Yeah. That's going to say, I will think for you. I will tell you what's good. I will tell you how to be good. I will tell you what things to do in your life because it feels so safe. It feels so safe to be able to outsource your personal decision making to somebody who you perceive has more power than you.
And this could be someone who does Reiki. This can be someone who does foot zoning. This can be a boss. This can be a yoga instructor.
Another pastor of another church.
Yep.
Anyone who will come along in your life to say, hey, I actually do know more than you, and you should listen to me without question. That feels really safe because our Mormon minds are trained to want that, to hunger after absolute certainty. We want certainty so badly. I want to know that I'm on the right path. I want to know that what I'm doing is true. That letting go of that feeling and looking inward was something I had never done at all. I'd always asked, what does God want me to do? I never asked, what do I want me to do? And learning to shift from what does God want me to do to what do I want me to do was, I think, for me, the most difficult aspect of leaving Mormonism, because suddenly every choice had to be made by myself without the promptings of God. And so I think these appeals to authority, like if I go to a college and get a degree, that'll give me authority, or that will give me enough credence that I can feel confident. Or if I find a new church, or even when I was working on the book, I really wanted to have, this book is self-published, I really wanted to have a traditional publisher, because in the writing community, having a traditional publisher is viewed as the most important aspect of the book, is having this traditional organization step down off their pedestal and say, we've chosen you to be good enough for us. And that gives you legitimacy. So it's not your ideas in the book, it's not you as a person, it's not you as the author, but the publishing house is what's giving you legitimacy. It's the church that gives you legitimacy. It's the organization that makes you feel legitimate. I think it's very difficult to grant ourselves the permission to feel legitimate without looking for an outside source, for some outside traditional source of power to say we're legitimate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's very empowering to say, I am my own authority. I am my own proof of power. I am my own guiding star. I like saying I'm the god of my own world because I get to choose what I do with my life. And having that shift is really empowering and beautiful.
I think, do you find what's challenging about that is kind of oftentimes where this hits in your journey? Because I think for many people coming out where you're feeling that sense of betrayal of an organization, that your own trust in yourself is hit in that betrayal. You're like, wait, how did I not see this? How did I not? And so it presents a challenge because as we're making this flip to kind of turn inward, it's at a time where our self-trust may feel low. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, if I was wrong about this, what if my next step is wrong too? And I think the way you work yourself out of that is that you choosing the church, especially for people who were born in the church, actually never happened. You never did choose the church. Your parents chose the church. You were probably a good kid that wanted to please your parents. If I think being raised in a religion where you're saying, I love to see the temple, praise to the man, I don't know that children raised in the church ever made a truly conscious decision to become Mormon. They just were. And so if you're leaving and feeling like, oh, how did I make this choice that was so wrong? I would say, I would question if you truly made the choice to begin with. I think maybe for converts, it's a little bit different, but for converts who converted in adulthood, they probably, I would almost guess, they would need the book less because they've had a lot of exposure to a lot of the topics I cover.
Yeah.
And I think I think the longer time you spent in the church, the more likely it has dominance over your identity.
Yeah.
Born in the church, 20 years in the church, converted, whatever it is. The longer you spend, the more time you're going to need to break away from it.
And I'll just say that the complexity of this point about developing your own intrinsic internal sense of authority versus outsourcing your authority is two things. Ex-Mormons can really mess up their lives. Like some people become responsible alcohol drinkers, maybe most, but some become alcoholics and some develop healthy sexuality and then others blow up their marriage with, and that, of course, the immediate response is, well, that happens inside Mormonism all the time. There's no difference internally or externally, but we have been raised to fear that God is all wise and that we aren't smart enough and capable enough to make responsible decisions, or our passions are so strong that they'll pull us down.
Yeah.
Our passions of sex or of wanting drugs or of food or whatever it is. And so we're not really taught to believe that we have the wisdom to healthily navigate a life.
Right.
But you're saying all of us do, or some of us do, or many of us do?
I think that we need to, I think we need to consider other aspects of our lives that are dangerous or are risky that we participate in as Mormons without question. For example, driving a car. driving a car is actually quite dangerous. Thousands of people die in car accidents.
Daily.
But yeah, daily. But you don't see people raising posters up, end car use. You don't see people saying, have you ever really considered that you should be driving this car? It's really dangerous. You don't see people in mass giving up their cars. Most people, if there's public transit being put in, a lot of people complain about it. And so there are lots of risks in our lives that are just as risky as drug use. Even pregnancy. Women are heavily encouraged to get pregnant and have as many pregnancies as they can handle. Pregnancy is very dangerous, not just because a woman may die, but health risks. The level of complications that come with pregnancy is very high. And you don't hear people at the pulpit saying, yes, get pregnant, but consider the risks of pregnancy and consider the ways you can have a stopgap to, prepare against those risks, ensure safeguards against those risks. You don't hear people saying, let's consider the risks of pregnancy, even though as far as health goes, as far as life and death goes, pregnancy is very dangerous. But nobody ever questions that. Mm-hmm. Nobody ever puts that on a scale of safety or risk. It's unquestionably, yes, pregnancy is good no matter what.
Yeah.
The other point that I think draws people to gurus, and I know ex-Mormons that think Joseph Smith was a fraud, but they'll go to like a medium to talk to their dead loved ones, or a medium that says that they can communicate with their guardian angels, and I'm not disparaging any of that. I'm just saying this desire for an external authority is really powerful. And I think the other complicating factor here is complexity. Like when you go with the Mormon Church, you may love or hate its behavioral guidelines, but it's got the list and you just follow it. You say, what do I need to do? Oh, here's the list. Let me read it. Okay, now I know what to do. When you're an ex-religious person or ex-Mormon, you got to figure out what are coffees? Which ones do I want? What about cannabis? What about marriage? What about honesty? What about my purpose in life? Like, how about raising my kids? What do I do? What's moral? What do I tell my kids? There's like 10,000 things you have to think through and then decisions you have to make that are so simplified when you just join some church and do what they tell you to do. Yeah. Some people are just overwhelmed by that level of effort and complexity, and they seek the simplicity and the efficiency of someone just telling them what to do.
Yeah, I think that that's how we end up, though, in a life like mine, where I really avoided any sort of choice or dream I avoided pursuing things in the name of my faith. And yes, I think sometimes when we choose safety, we give up opportunity and we give up what we could have had if we were willing to put the effort in to discover ourselves and to discover what path is going to be good. And even for me personally, if I make a mistake now, which I do, I would rather have my mistakes belong to me and be mistakes that I made instead of mistakes that I made because I outsourced my choice making to some organization. Because the truth is, no one knows your life as well as you do. No one knows what you want as well as you do. And the only person who has to actually live your life is you. And so if somebody tells you, you should do this, you should have this job, you should try this, they don't have to do it. They're not the ones that are going to be working that job. They're not the ones that are going to be having those kids. It's going to be you. And so it might seem easier at the front end to just say, okay, my dad told me I should do this. My church said I should do this, so I just will. But then when you're the one living in your own life, they're not the ones that have to face the repercussions or consequences or heartaches that come from the advice that they gave you. You're the one that's going to be living in that life. And so choosing the life that you want is, at least you can say, at least this is what I wanted. Even if I make a mistake, at least this is the mistake that came as a outcome of the choice that I made to begin with.
There's a comment that just came in. Funky Fresh writes, I'd love to see John sit down with America's top medium, Matt Frazier. He'd be blown away. But yes, Joseph was a fraud. But there are individuals with the medium gift. I've even been able to give readings. Okay, I'll just say this really quickly because I don't want to get sidetracked. Maybe, I don't know. maybe there are mediums. And my point wasn't to tell people they're wrong to go seek mediums or that mediums in and of themselves are evil or bad. My point is, anytime somebody tells you they have access to the divine that you don't, it puts you in a vulnerable position of being manipulated or abused. Because maybe the person has it, but most often these people are shown to be frauds or just making stuff up or just being no different than you. And so you put yourself at risk to misdirection or abuse the minute that you believe that somebody else is able to access divine power about your life. So go to your mediums all you want. Go to your person that talks to your guardian angels all you want. Just beware that there are risks associated with giving someone else your power, whether it's a religion or a partner or a yoga instructor or a podcaster or an author. Margie.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was going to say, in this idea of connecting more with yourself, which I love, don't you find that, what it looked like within Mormonism, there was like a very perfectionistic way of how we related to ourselves, right? It was like this idea of mistakes and being the best version of ourselves at all times that I feel like shifts. Have you found that this shifts where it's almost like the process and end goal of connecting with yourself? It's different than Mormonism. Like, it's much more exploratory, getting to know yourself and your own preferences and desires, as well as, so in that way, you're kind of gaining data on yourself, as well as kind of, as opposed to being perfect or avoiding like a mistake. And let's just be real, like a mistake is basically something you don't know. So that's all of us. Like, we don't know a ton of things. So a mistake is like just how we're made in the world. It's inevitable. And it's like things learned. Right? Yeah. So, and then it's kind of like the objective, instead of perfectionism or not making a mistake, is like living your values, or, that becomes more of the thing. So that shift, have you noticed a shift away from this idea of perfectionism, a fear of being flawed or making a mistake, and having that affect your self-trust, as opposed to like, yeah, now I'm actually exploring myself, I'm getting data on myself, and I'm just trying to live a life that I feel connected to or that reflects my values right now?
Yeah, I think you're reminding me of the talk, Good, Better, Best, how, I don't know if you all remember that, how even if you're making a good choice as a Mormon, you could be making a better one.
Optimize.
And that talk really wrecked me in a lot of ways, because even if I was doing something good, I felt like almost a good is sin if there's a better and best. That's like celestial, terrestrial, those are the three kingdoms. I don't want to be good. I don't even want to be better. I want to be the best Mormon I can be. And so even within perfectionism, you can rank your perfectionism and you can push your perfectionism to be even more perfect. And after leaving, it's very hard to detach yourself from this value, black and white morality, this higher, perfectionism, to maybe whether I choose A, B, or C, it's not about versions of good, better, best. Maybe A, B, or C, I should be directed by the questions of what will make me the happiest? What will make me the most fulfilled? What will do the most good in the world? Those types of questions that really help you self-reflect on these options, those are the questions we should be asking, I think. And it should be in a questioning of the self over a questioning of an appeal to a moral authority.
Love it. All right. That's points 1 and 2. What's point 3?
Point 3 is how to decide if you should stay in the church or leave.
That's a big one.
That's a really big one. And as we said at the top, I am not in the book trying to necessarily persuade anyone to stay or leave, but also helping, or because I felt like that for a period of time. I questioned, I lost my faith, And when you lose your faith, you have to look at your life and ask, how much of this am I about to lose if I let the genie out of the bottle? If I lose my faith, if I fully walk away, how many things in my life disappear? And that picture of loss, I think, keeps a lot of people in. And it pushes people to be physically and mentally out for many years.
And that's called PIMO, P-I-M-O,
Yes.
on Ex-Mormon Reddit, basically.
Yes. And I think in my life, when I make a decision out of fear, typically I regret that decision. I think if you're making a decision to stay in out of fear of what will come into your life, I totally get it. I understand. And I think if that's your ultimate choice, I think it makes sense. But I think if we can make choices out of a place of courage and hope and desire for what am I going to want 5 years from now? What am I going to want 10 years from now? Who will I want to be 30 years from now? If I have this period of my life where I have to disengage from the church and walk away, it's going to be really painful. But in 20 years, you'll probably be really glad that you got away, that you made the decision out of courage and hope. And so in the book, I have a series of questions, and these are questions that I asked myself, or that I reflected on as I was leaving, and I was going to maybe read some of them, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
And I think asking yourself these questions might clarify if leaving is something that you're ready to do, that you want to do, that's going to be worthwhile. It says, so this is one of the reflect and write sections that are throughout the book, and I also have journal pages at the end for people who, if you're wanting to write or just, write a little bit about what you're thinking. It says, what do you fear will happen if you are honest about what you believe and don't believe? Can you conceal your true self from the people closest to you? How will it feel to be dishonest about your true convictions with your spouse, parents, and friends? Are you willing to prioritize other people's versions of who you should be over the chance to explore and discover your true self? What would a lifetime of participation in the church cost you? Are you willing to hide all activity not authorized by the church? This means concealing anything from drinking coffee to a potential relationship with someone of the same sex. This means lying about participating in Sunday activities that are not approved. This means foregoing a tattoo or hiding any alcohol when your family comes over. If you do not believe but want to stay in the church, are you still willing to continue to wear garments daily, hold a calling, go to church every Sunday, attend the temple often, bear your testimony, give church talks, and pay 10% of your income to the church's tithing? How close can your relationships with loved ones stay when you must hide every step you take outside of what a good Mormon should do? Will you bless and baptize current or future children into a church you no longer believe is the truth, or lie to a family member about a baptism taking place that never happened? Will you send your children away for a 2-year mission when you believe the basis of the gospel is false? Will you lie about their temple marriage too? And so these questions are rhetorical in many ways, but kind of meant to just envision, if you choose to stay in the church, if you have a lifetime in the church, what is that going to cost you? And if you no longer believe, just envision what your life will look like as Mormonism is everything. Mormonism is church callings, tithing, temple worship, garment wearing. I think if you no longer believe, maintaining that is really costly to your mental health and to your identity and to how much you have to conceal in order to maintain that. And so I think these are the questions that I asked myself and that I envisioned happening in the future. If I fake it till I make it, if I just, hope that my testimony comes back, if I hope that my faith returns, maybe it never does, it probably never will. Am I going to baptize my kids into this church? Can I do that? And so these are the questions I asked to help myself think about what my life in the church would look like if I no longer had a testimony.
Yeah, yeah, I think those are really good questions, and it's a great introduction to this very complex topic. Margie and I lost our faith in 2001, and we didn't leave the Mormon Church until they excommunicated us, but us in 2015. Now, there were a lot of reasons why we stayed. We stayed. Number one, I think I was terrified that I couldn't raise happy, healthy, moral kids without Mormonism or without some sort of organized religion. That was probably the main reason. But then secondarily, because the church was made for me, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the weekly seeing people. I enjoyed the hymns, the sense of awe and the inspiration that the music gave me. And, and I knew that no church was probably true. And so this is my tribe. I kind of took on the progressive Jew mindset of like, this is my people. And that worked for us for a long, long time. But I will say that it was incredibly stressful for my psychology, that I was constantly tormented about, wow, another LGBTQ person just died by suicide. Am I being complicit in the harm? Oh, another mixed faith marriage couple just got divorced. By giving my name to the church, by even giving money or volunteering for the church, am I complicit in the harm that the church does? As much good as it does, or as much good as it does for me, what about the harm that it's doing to a lot of other people? And I'm only bringing all that up because over time it became incredibly stressful for me to go week after week carrying that cognitive dissonance and that cognitive load inside myself. Having said that, there are, one of the first accountants I ever had for Mormon Stories, I was living in Logan. He loved my podcast. He did my accounting for free. He's like, oh yeah, my wife doesn't know I don't believe. My kids don't know I don't believe. And I'm faking it to my wife and I'm faking it to my kids because I'm 100% sure my wife will divorce me if I leave the church. And I don't want to break up my family. There's another example of like several church employees who are just like, I'm 20 years into my career. I work for the Mormon Church. I'm a CES instructor. I'm an institute teacher, seminary teacher. No one's going to hire me at 6 figures. And so I'm just going to wait this out and retire because I just can't afford to lose my job. So I just want to always give space for people who are in very tough situations. And there's also people that are mentally ill, and for them, the church helps keep their wheels on their wagon. And that's what makes, for me, this decision incredibly complex for some people, right?
Yeah, I think of the allegory of Plato's cave, where he's in the cave, he's happy in the cave, and then when he leaves the cave, he realizes, oh, there was a lot more out here than I expected. And I think sometimes when we're in the church and we're happy in the church, it can feel like this is the best it will ever be. This is my 6-figure job. This is the best my marriage could ever be. This is, we might, and like, I agree with you. I validate anyone who chooses to stay in the church. I think that's your choice. I think it's worth considering, if you leave, could it be better? Could your life, is it possible to even know what you're missing by having Mormonism was the thing in my life, was the number one, was the largest, was the hugest, most overpowering part of my life that was through every fiber of my being. And I have rarely met an ex-Mormon who says, I regret leaving so much. This was the worst decision of my life.
I wish I could go back.
I wish I could go
Said
back.
almost no ex-Mormon ever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, when I'm thinking back to how you were talking about us staying in that in-between kind of space for so long and attending, something that I think about is that I was out, I feel like a little bit more than you. Once you told me, I kind of had a different personal relationship with the church after that point. What kept me going was this idea of our children and wanting our kids to be able to have, at that time, we lived in Logan, quite an insular community, that I wanted them to have this sense that their journey was theirs, that we weren't overwriting their experience. The irony of that, and we never know what we don't know at the time. And so I have compassion around this. I just think, again, this is a complicated thing. But in my mind, John and I would sometimes volley going to church to support whatever children. We were a mixed faith family. And so we would attend sacrament meeting with whatever child was attending at that time. So I had many years where I was no longer believing, but I went in a limited sense to support a child that was going. And I think what's so interesting about that now, as our kids are so much older, is that, we have a number of children who identify as LGBTQIA, and that this thing that I thought that I was giving them in retrospect, they've come to us as parents and said how damaging it was. And so that they received all these messages that they're now, trying to work through with their own identities. And so it is tricky, and we all have our own reasons for doing what we do and for staying in spaces. But I do really feel like, and no matter how best we make a decision, the hard part is we don't know what we don't know at the time. And so a heavy dose of just sort of compassion. But I really like your approach of asking yourself the questions and giving yourself space to really feel out your own answers, within that. And as much freedom and choices as you can allow yourself.
Yeah, I think you reminded me of just the thought, if you as a person no longer believe in the church and you're still taking your kids, and someday they come to that conclusion, I don't believe in the church, how will they feel knowing that you took them to a church that you believed was false? I think your kids will someday be adults. It's worth asking, if I'm taking them, why? Is it for the morals? Is it for the community? Is it for the good? And are there other organizations where they can learn those things that aren't as problematic as what Mormonism teaches? Because ultimately, Mormonism is not a like go to church every once in a while, feel good for a bit, go home, enjoy your family. It is a let's go to the temple and wear the robes of the priesthood and do the patriarchal grip and wear garments every day. Mm-hmm. And that is the heart of Mormonism. Mm-hmm. And so if you're taking your kids to the church, that the goal for the church is for them to go to the temple, to do the endowment, to serve a 2-year mission, to do the same when they marry in the temple. So I think by taking kids to church, you're putting them on that path. And if that's not the path that you envision for them, if you just want them to learn the morals, to have the good, I think the discrepancy in how what the church will ask them to do and be versus what you want them to take from church are very different. And so recognizing potentially the discrepancy between those two things, and also recognizing that there are other opportunities and organizations where those things can be learned. There's so many good kids outside of Mormonism. As a teacher for a very long time, most of my students weren't Mormon once I left Utah. Tons of really amazing, spectacular children come out of secular homes, religious, lots of different religious denominations. You don't need Mormonism to raise good kids. And I think it's also when I left, when me and Jackson were talking about our future family, I think Mormonism really teaches you that only Mormons can make good kids, that you need the church in order to teach and help have kids be on this good path. And I asked him, what if we leave and our kids end up as drug addicts, which is what I pictured, as a active member happens to kids who aren't members. And he thought for a second, and I remember it so clearly, asked, what happens if we stay in the church and our kids are gay? What will that do?
Or drug addicts.
Or drug addicts anyway.
Utah has a massive prescription drug, abuse problem.
Yes.
So, I mean,
it's not going to safeguard against everything. Mm-hmm. And so you have to ask, if it's not a true safeguard against all of these things, if it happens to Mormon kids too, is the good I'm hoping my kids glean from the church, can I find that elsewhere?
Yeah.
This is a total aside, but I would love to do a study of non-Mormon men in Utah versus Mormon men, active, faithful Mormon men in Utah. I would be willing to bet money that, and this is just a random thing, that active Mormon men in Utah look at more porn than non-Mormon men in Utah. So like, you just don't know the devil you're dancing with sometimes. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying like, there's a lot of mental health problems, a lot of dysfunction within Orthodox Mormonism. And the final thing I'll just say is back to the point you made. I made the decision that I could not live with myself if I lied to my kids, raised them in something that I knew was false. And then when they're 30 or 40 and they had decided to go on a mission, get married, forgo education, give all this time and money to the church, at some point in their future, they would discover that I had lied to them and deceived them. I just realized I couldn't probably live with myself if I had done that. So,
and leaving the church is so hard that, and so many people are leaving the church that you also have to ask yourself, who's going to do the hard work? Is it going to be me or is it going to be my kids? Because if I know it's false, if I know it's not true, and I stay in for the kids, and someday now they're married, now they have kids, now they have to get divorced, now they have to, face every single implication that comes with leaving, and I've now put that on them as their responsibility.
Just to close out, this idea, one of the most important beliefs I felt like I deconstructed that was so pivotal to how I parented was the belief that my children were at a scarcity naturally to be moral. Because I feel like really religions benefit. They're the ones that create the scarcity on a level so that only they can fill it. And the minute I was able to kind of research that, really look into, have experiences, connect with people, reflect on my childhood where I was on the East Coast and not surrounded by Mormons, all the good people I knew. And once I was able to, and look at my children, experience my children as whole and beautiful, abundant, like abundantly good, I was able to relax a little bit. So I think also, sometimes the beliefs we deconstruct are a lot deeper. They're very like rooted in this sense of scarcity versus abundant, particularly with us as humans and our children.
Yeah.
When it comes to kind of this innate goodness, as opposed to like, without it, you have nothing. Without religion, you are nothing. You are depraved and you are, just destined for evil things.
Yeah, I think it really steals humanity away. The idea that from me to you, that for me to be good to you, I need a God to tell me that, it's actually really twisted. That human beings can't, at their own face, at their own value, just from human to human, we are unable to engage with each other in moral good ways, but that we need a higher power to tell us that. That is such a twisted idea to me, but it's what religion asserts. Religion says you need me to teach you to be good. And I just think that children don't need goodness to be taught to them. I think that the church teaches them a lot of guilt. But I think we can trust that humans are at their heart good, looking for connection, looking for closeness, looking for kindness, wanting kindness, and that can be enough to have a good society.
Absolutely. Beautiful. All right.
The last question I was going to ask, I forgot this point, was a question that really shook me about this question of staying in the church or leaving, losing my testimony. I think it might be, I don't know if it's in the CES letter or if I just read it online, but it was the question, if the church isn't true, when would you want to find out? And if the church isn't true, when would you want to do something about it? And I think when I heard that question, it really struck me, because it feels like if I keep ignoring this information, if I keep ignoring historical inaccuracies of the Book of Mormon, if I keep ignoring the moral questions of the church, the homophobia, will I be glad I ignored it and then in 10 years I have to deal with this? Or is it worth it to just take the plunge now? Point number 4 is strategies for coming out to your friends and family, because I do feel like it's a coming out experience of its own. This revelation, we have to figure out how to finally break the news that feels so devastating to our family.
And I'll just say the stereotypical way that many ex-Mormons historically have tried to deal with this coming out is to just write some big old letter, email, to write their own version of the CES letter, or just at some big family event to just start like, I don't want to say throwing up, but just like purging all the historical problems with Joseph Smith and with the church and polygamy, to just like let it all out, either in letter form or an email form or at Thanksgiving. And sometimes that can really damage relationships from the start. So it's complicated.
Yeah. And as, like I said, with every chapter in this book, these are suggestions. These are ideas. Mm-hmm. This is a sounding board. This is a friend to talk to and think through different options.
Yeah.
This is such a difficult thing to do that there truly is no way to do it right, because it's going to be hard and messy, no matter which option or which route you choose. Mm-hmm. For me, telling my mom was the thing I was the most worried about. And I knew that she was going to take it really hard. And she always, I think I knew that she needed to see me wrestle with my faith. But I also knew I didn't want to break the news to her or talk to her about it till I had already made the decision that I was 100% sure, because I knew if I told her I'm questioning my faith and then I take it back, she would remember that for my entire life. And it wasn't going to be worth it to question my faith vulnerably in front of her. So essentially, once I truly lost my faith, once I completely stopped going to church, I almost like set myself back 6 months in her mind and said, "Hey mom, I'm really starting to question the church." Even though I already was out, I knew I needed to essentially give her a runway of grieving. I knew she needed to see me struggle. She needed to see me read the scriptures. I wanted to preserve my relationship with her. And so I was willing to essentially engage with this idea that I had kept from her previously of my true faith struggle. And so I began talking to her almost, every night about my faith crisis and reading scriptures. And I finally broke the news about 6 months after I finally chose. I finally chose to leave the church, and then I struggled with her for 6 months, and then I told her I fully was leaving the church. And even though that felt a little bit disingenuous, that was just the strategy I used for that relationship, because I felt that's what she needed in order to maintain her respect for me. And we lived far away at the time, so I think had she been maybe geographically closer to me, she might have been questioning, like, why aren't you going to church anymore? But almost, that's just one of the options, is the slow burn option. This idea of, over a very long period of time, you're essentially setting up your family to accept that you've left, but never having to have a totally faithful and then suddenly totally unfaithful, very jarring experience, shocking experience, introducing almost like the nugget of, hey, I'm questioning more. I only go once a week or once a month to church. Like having a really long window where they can start to accept that this is happening, I think in many ways helped our relationship stay at least somewhat close throughout that process, versus dropping this bomb on her that I think would have left her so reeling that she would have had a hard time staying really close to me throughout that process. And so I think that's one strategy people can use to almost grow the seed of, hey, I'm leaving the church, into this I've left the church tree, is letting it progress really slowly, even if you've already made up your mind, but allowing them to see your struggle, I think, can help them accept that at the very least, it wasn't easy for you. At the very least, you gave it your all, because I think sometimes that's what they need to see, versus dropping the bomb.
I have to say, the idea of my kids, adult kids, even worse, having to sort of like distort reality out of care and concern for my feelings as a parent is really disturbing to me. I'm reminded of the book Margie introduced to me, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And I'm not talking about your mom. I've never met your mom. But like the idea of my kids lying to me and hiding things from me because they're worried that if they tell me the truth, that I won't be able to deal with it. That's actually, in 2024, a parental nightmare for me. Being alive is a burden enough, especially for kids, adult kids these days. I would be horrified if my kid felt like they couldn't just tell me the truth and that I wasn't emotionally mature enough to just, now, number one, deal with it, and number two, love them unconditionally.
Yeah.
And so it makes me sad, as a parent, the idea of even floating this idea makes me sad, but I think it shows a lot of compassion on your part. There are competing values here. One is honesty.
Or authenticity.
And the other is compassion. And you literally, I don't know, at least partly seem to have been driven by compassion for your mom. Now, maybe it was also a desire to minimize the pain that she might inflict on you.
Yeah, or that you might feel at witnessing her in distress and feeling like you're the cause.
But the classic example I have is like the 90-year-old grandparent dying of cancer. Do you sit them down and tell them you lost your faith when you were their favorite grandkid? There's a withholding of information out of compassion that I think is an important thing to consider.
And I think, too, I had, what does it cost me to do that? It costs me, I was still trying out coffee. I was still trying out having drinks with my friends. I still gave up wearing garments before that. It wasn't costing me a lot. I wasn't repressing so much of myself to just have these weekly phone calls with her. What it would have cost me, though, to drop the bomb, I think, is potentially our entire relationship. And so to me, in choosing this approach with her, it was about weighing the risks and rewards, or the costs and benefits of what am I going to lose if I am immediately as authentic as possible, versus what will I lose or gain if I do this route of letting her see the struggle and respect me and grieve slowly instead of having to do this all in one night.
Yeah, what I love is this is the slow burn is one approach you offer.
Yeah.
There are a lot of approaches, and each approach kind of has strengths and harder aspects to it. Like so it's really about finding the approach that fits best with your circumstances.
Yes, and I also talk too about when you're considering how to tell your family or if to tell your family, just the idea of truly living your life for yourself versus living your life for your family, living your life even for your spouse. I think I know personally people who have put off telling their family in the name of keeping the peace, only for it to really blow up in their face later on. And so sometimes it's easier to use avoidance as a way to keep yourself safe. But often, when they discover a bottle of wine in your cabinet, or when they come in and there's coffee in the trash can, some other blow up like that may end up exploding this secret anyways, finding some social media post, seeing you tagged in a bar. These things might still be the way they find out. And it's better if you've made the choice to leave, I think, to come forward and be as honest in whatever way you choose, and to not continue to try to live in secrecy, to keep the peace with your family.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's, and I should add, in addition to this amazing book, it's probably worth mentioning for those who are just really seeking support. Margie and I and Natasha put a podcast together called The Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis. And we have like over 70 hours of free coaching and support for people who are navigating a faith crisis. And I mention that because we do like 3 hours on how to come out to believing family and friends.
Yeah.
The biggest piece of advice that I have is to make them feel safe. Whatever you do, if they feel threatened by you, if they feel afraid by you, they're more likely to cut you off, to restrict your access, to shun you, etc. If you do your best to make them feel not threatened, to make them feel safe, to make them feel like you respect their beliefs and are never going to try and change it, not only are they most likely to treat you best, they're actually more open to the issues that maybe caused you to doubt or question once they're at ease and calm and don't feel like you're coming at them. But whenever you come at them with a list of 500 flaws of Joseph Smith or 600 things that make the church untrue, their defenses immediately go up.
Yeah.
And you can experience the backfire effect where they actually defend their faith more strongly than they would have otherwise. And you don't want to strengthen their faith, surely. So do your best to make them feel like you're never going to attack their faith, never going to try and undermine their faith, and like you respect them. That's
Yeah.
my
Yeah, I
piece of
think
advice.
too, as you're describing that process, I think it's really important as people are beginning to tell their family, beginning to tell the people in their life, to have some friend or some source of support that will support you throughout this process. And so I suggest in the book having a non-member friend, or having a therapist, or just having someone who, let that person, that support person you've chosen, let them know, hey, I'm going to call my mom and talk to her. Can you call me after to make sure I'm okay?
I love that.
Because the idea that in the most heart-wrenching part of your life, that you have to go to your family and only be supportive to them while receiving no support in return.
Not just no support, but opposition. Yeah.
That you have to go to them and you're tiptoeing, you're being so careful with what you have to say, you're trying so hard to just stay almost in their good graces so they still love you. But at the same time, you're internally wrecked, and having no support given in return, no love given in, hope, I maybe love given in return, but it might be kind of like, I'm so sad that you told me this, but I love you anyways. It's not going to be like, I'm so proud of you for making this really hard decision in your life. So having someone who is kind of outside of the game of Mormonism, outside of this realm of high demand religion, who can just be with you and love you and say, hey, that sucks. Like, I am proud of you. If no one's saying this to you, at least I will say to you, I'm proud of you. I'm here for you. I love and support you unconditionally. I'm here for you in your time of need. So having, and even if you don't have anyone that's a non-member in your life, a therapist, even having someone on the Ex-Mormon message board to message with, or to have a post up, having some way of, after these big events, to go back to a place of safety with someone that will support you, I think is very important.
Nice. Other points about coming out?
I think I have a section about marriage. And that
Coming out to your spouse?
Yeah, coming out to your spouse.
Okay.
And I think this is probably the number one relationship that is the most stressful and anxious, because your spouse is, maybe you can kind of lie or, re-explain events to your parents because they no longer live with you. You can tell your siblings, whatever. It's very difficult to conceal from your spouse. It's very difficult to you kind of often, I think for a lot of people, you're going to be real with your spouse in real time, which makes it more chaotic or potentially traumatic. And so I think too, a lot of times people, as they leave, they're leaving at different paces. So maybe your spouse is still in, you're still out, but in 6 months, your spouse may be questioning. And the idea of waiting for 6 months, I think, is really difficult for some people, because you actually don't know if they're ever going to start questioning, or even if one person is like, I want to go, like my husband, I want to go occasionally to church. This is still good in my life. And I was like, I'm totally out. I never want to go to church again. Even that discrepancy can be really mentally challenging to face within a marriage. And so just the idea of not just burning it all down in the heat of the moment. Trying, and this is just a suggestion, your relationship, don't stay in an abusive relationship or in a relationship that's causing you to feel, suicidal, or anything that's truly damaging. But if you have a really good relationship, except for this aspect of Mormonism, trying to keep yourself from just burning it all down, divorcing, calling it all off, and seeing if there's a way to, and there's a lot of really great mixed faith podcasts, how to come together in a way that you can still work through these difficult phase of life, because you never know. I mean, I have a close friend who her husband left 3 years before her. They stayed married because they had a good marriage. It was very difficult, but then 3 years later, she also was ready to leave. And she's really grateful that she is still with her spouse and she has a child with him, and they're a really happy ex-Mormon, post-Mormon family. But those 3 years were really hard. And so I think considering if this relationship is good, if this relationship is happy, except for this one piece, are there ways we can work around it or through it? And maybe even potentially someday this person will be at the same place I am.
Really quickly, one huge pitfall or risk that I see is the non-believing spouse in a mixed faith marriage doesn't want to disclose to their spouse, and so they hide it from their spouse, and then they get in the habit of hiding things from their spouse. And whether it's taking off their garments when they're on business trips, or having a drink of alcohol while you're on a business trip, or secretly not paying your tithing without telling your spouse. There's a couple real risks to that. One is that you grow apart. Well, one is that you learn to lie, and you don't want to get in the habit of learning to lie to your spouse. The second is that you grow apart, where if you do this over months and years and you're slowly keeping your most intimate stuff from your partner, you start growing apart, and there's always a risk of it's like, oh, my wife doesn't understand or my husband doesn't understand, but this old high school friend from the internet understands. Over time, you can get in the habit of confiding in other people because you need an outlet, and that can lead to explosive problems in the relationship. And then the third is that once you start hiding things from your spouse, inevitably they're probably going to catch you.
Yeah.
And when they catch you, now you're not just dealing with the shock of the betrayal of them learning that you've changed the deal, that you agreed to, be temple married and faithful forever. Not only are they going to be upset that you've lost your faith and changed the contract or the agreement, but you're going to have to deal with the added problem of them feeling like you've been hiding and lying to them. And that's a double whammy, or even a triple whammy of now what you're going to have to deal with. And then if there's infidelity, you're going to have to deal with that as well. So for all those reasons, it's this idea of avoiding some pain now for a world of pain, and even pain that can be fatal to your relationship later.
Yeah.
People sometimes think, I'll just avoid the pain and hide it. But what they're often doing is just compounding the pain and the risk and just pushing it off till later, when later it may be too big to recover from. Whereas if you rip the Band-Aid, which I think is one of the terms you use in your book, sometimes if you rip the Band-Aid and deal with it through connection, through openness, through communication and negotiation, and I'll just add therapy, a really good marriage and mixed faith marriage coach or therapist, you can avoid a lot of future pain and problems. And I want to give just a quick recommendation. There's a really good podcast called Marriage on a Tightrope where Alan and Katie Mount have dozens of episodes and even a Facebook community and Marco Polo communities dedicated to supporting mixed faith Mormon marriages. Please check out Marriage on a Tightrope podcast and the Facebook community if you're in this situation.
Yes.
Yeah, and as you alluded to, like the Band-Aid rip is another of your ways to leave. That's another one that you kind of list as an option.
Yeah, this one is just what it sounds like, which is to just come out and say it and and this is how I did it, not with my mom. After I went through that process with my mom, I mentioned earlier, I just wrote a big long Facebook post. I hadn't told anyone outside of my spouse, my mom, my dad, my immediate family. And so to kind of break the news to everyone all at once, I just had a big Facebook post. I didn't say anything about, here's all the reasons I hate Joseph Smith. I just said, this is just a post to let everyone in my community know I have chosen to leave the church. These are the reasons why. I put the post, the script of the post in the book. And I even said, please do not comment on this post. If you have something to share with me about this, please direct message me. And people would go and comment and say, I'm so sad. This is so sad to see you've left the church. And I would just delete the comments because I just wanted it to be my own. I wanted the narrative to stay about, hey, if you care enough about me to make a comment about me leaving the church, direct message me. You don't need to get in an argument with my aunt about the church on sometimes the comments of a Facebook post can get so chaotic. So I would just delete the post. If you care about me, just direct message me and engage with me on a one-on-one basis. You don't need to comment so that all of our other people who served in our mission can see that you raised your hand as someone who was unhappy that I made this decision. Also with the marriage belief divide, I wanted to add just to over-explain everything. I think over-explaining is really helpful because the assumptions you can make about this person after they've left, if you leave, the assumptions your spouse can make about you, suddenly all bets are off. When you marry a member of the church, you have so many assumptions that you can make about that person that you never even discuss. When two BYU students are dating, they're not saying, hey, what about non-monogamy? How do you feel about that? They're not going to have a conversation about that. There's assumptions. Do you want to go out to a bar someday? No, you never even talk about it. All these assumptions level up upon each other, layer on up, that once someone leaves, all those assumptions overnight in your spouse's mind fall away. And so they might think that you will cheat on them because you've left the church. They might think you will come home drunk or get in a DUI because you've left the church. All of these assumptions about your moral compass fall away after you leave Mormonism. And so if you do come to them and say, hey, I want to try coffee, that might to them also represent, hey, I want to try drugs. Hey, I want to be in a relationship with someone else. Hey, I want to, any number of crazy things the Mormon mind can come up with. They might think that you're going to escalate to that overnight. And so I have in the book just a kind of script for how to communicate with somebody, hey, and not just making the decision and say, hey, I drank coffee today, because that puts in the relationship, hey, I'm going to make choices that I never discussed with you. Not necessarily that you're asking for permission, but just the idea of, hey, I respect you and I love you. I wanted to let you know I want to try drinking coffee. I don't want to just put a coffee maker on our counter and not talk to you about it. How do you feel about me drinking coffee? And having this conversation before you engage in some of these non-Mormon activities so that they see that you're not just going to go out and burn your life down from a Mormon's perspective, but that the dialogue will always come first. The communication, the back and forth will always come first. And even if you still go through with that action and they're not super happy about it, at least they know that anytime you're going to do something not Mormon, they will communicate about it first and talk about, hey, we have kids. Do you want me to just get coffee out of the house so the kids don't see it? So that at least that they can rely and trust that there will always be dialogue about these things, instead of that you're just going to start doing them, because that's really scary.
Yeah, we often say that a mixed faith marriage provides an incredible opportunity to improve your communication skills as a couple, and even improve your intimacy. Because what is intimacy? It's being vulnerable with each other and being able to still feel safe after you've been vulnerable. So it's a real opportunity to make your marriage better, believe it or not.
Yeah.
All right, that's 4.
That's
What's
4?
5? We're almost halfway done.
We're almost halfway. Number 5 is slow and steady wins the race. So just the idea of really slowing things down and walking and taking really careful steps. Because I know personally a lot of people who, once they left, the next day they were on Tinder and they were having people come over to their house, and they're going from being the most virtuous Mormon person to engaging, having sex with people they don't know, that they
random hookups
that they then regretted, and multiple hookups, And I think that comes from a place of, I think sometimes when we leave, our mind just goes into a craze and doesn't know what to do. I also use the example in the book of the first time I tried drinking. I was with another friend who was an ex-Mormon, and she had just recently, neither of us had tried drinking. And we bought just a bottle of tequila, and we took a shot, or like a little drink out of a cup. I didn't have shot glasses, of course, back then. And I looked at her, she looks at me, do you feel anything yet? And she's like, no, I don't feel anything. So 5 minutes later, we take another shot, completely not understanding the way alcohol is metabolized, or the idea of beer versus, if you drink a glass of beer, how that differs from taking 3 shots of liquor. And so I think in about 30 minutes, we were truly pounding this alcohol and had finished half the bottle. And I was at the kitchen, doing the dishes, or I don't know, getting something. And I just remember very suddenly, I can't feel my face. And this is the first time I've ever tried alcohol. I can't even feel my face. And I look over, and my friend is just on the couch, staring off into space. And the night very much devolved from there. I at one point, she was trying to walk across the room, and she tripped and hit her face on a table, and she woke up the next morning with a black eye. And I drunk texted my family chat with a random string of letters. Most of those people were Mormon, so I don't think they knew it was a drunk text. But yeah, just, instead of researching, how to drink, trying out alcohol for the first time, tips to stay safe. Alcohol is an intoxicant. What do I do to make sure I pace myself? I didn't do any of that. I just knew I want to try alcohol. I've never tried alcohol before. I no longer believe in the church, and I'm very excited and curious about this. And so instead of making it really informed choices around this new experience, I just sprinted head on into this thing that I knew nothing about. And instead of having my first experience be just something that was fun, something that was a good memory, it turned into something that was actually pretty scary. And that night too, I called my husband, who was on a work trip, and hung up mid-call. And when I woke up in the morning, I had so many missed calls from him, because I think he was just super worried about me. And for someone in the midst of kind of a faith transition to get a drunk call from their wife, and who hangs up abruptly and then doesn't answer any other calls, that's really scary. And thankfully, he is very loving and was understanding. But I think you could have an experience like that and see your spouse have a crazy night of drinking and think, this relationship is not going to work if you're going to do this all the time. What if you do this all the time? What's my response? And it's just easy to spiral out of control. And so this chapter is all about how to make these choices in a really thoughtful, concerted, conscious way, instead of spiraling into this wild, sprinting off the rails sort of experiences where you make choices that might lead to dangerous situations or just might lead to a lot of regret.
And that's one of the things I love about this book, How to Leave the Mormon Church, an Ex-Mormon's Guide to Rebuilding After Religion, is that you have sections around psychedelics, around alcohol, around sex, that kind of provide people with at least a little bit of advice and guidance to start with to help minimize some of the collateral damage and pain that they might face.
And basic information,
Yeah.
like the things that you mentioned
Education.
you did not know. Yeah,
Yeah.
You provide.
Like there's a
that.
section on what's a latte versus espresso versus a Americano versus a macchiato. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some practical info here that's useful.
Yeah, and I think, so on page 101, I have just like the framework for making these new decisions, or the framework for how to begin to have these new experiences. The first is research, learn, and plan. This would be listening to a bunch of podcasts, watching YouTube videos, reading articles. How does it work? What are the risks, rewards? How much should I take at a time? And then setting a day and time when you want to experiment instead of doing it immediately. Step 2 is discuss with a trusted and open-minded friend. Let them know, hey, I wanted to try out XYZ. Do you have any advice or thoughts or tips for me? Do you have anything I should look out for as a risk? Third would be share your decision if needed. Like if you're in a committed relationship, let them know, hey, I'm thinking of trying LSD. I wanted to talk to you about it. Let's read these articles together. Let's communicate about it. And then 4 is sample, then reflect. And this is, I use the word sample because it's important to just try a little bit. Don't go on Tinder and set up 4-5 hookups at a time. Don't drink an entire bottle of tequila. Don't go so hard that you're risking a lot of danger. Sample, meaning take a bite.
Don't take a second gummy cannabis before you've let the first
one
gummy kick in.
Yeah.
And I've never tried this stuff.
I really
I've
love
heard.
this because the underlying message is about care. It's really about taking good care of yourself during this time.
And that you can use education to avoid some of the pitfalls that happen if you have no education at all. A lot of Mormon people aren't educated at all about STDs or about, having casual sex with people. And so if you just think, oh, I want to do that, I will, you risk potentially ending up with a lot of risks, like physical risks, physical dangers, and also just regret and things that you'll wish you hadn't have done or that you wouldn't do if you just had education. And so the researching is about, if you're armed with education, you can understand, is this thing I want to try addictive? Is wearing a tank top, what settings are maybe a good opportunity? Like wearing a tank top in front of your Mormon family might end up making you feel embarrassed and shamed, whereas the first time wearing a tank top, maybe trying it at a bar or with friends who are very accepting might make you feel empowered and beautiful. And so, yes, try these experiences, but understand the risks, understand the rewards, and become as educated as possible before engaging so that you have the informed consent you need to have a good experience if it's something you want to try.
And I'll maybe offer a slightly contrarian view. Also, no, you don't have to try any of these things. So I know that Margie and I are probably really rare, but we've never tried alcohol to this day. We've never tried cannabis, or even had a psychedelic experience. And that's not because we think that's what everyone else should do. We've just decided we don't want to add that complexity into our lives, that risk. And so you don't have to do all these things that the church suggested you don't do as a reaction to what you were as a Mormon. It's perfectly acceptable to just say, thought it through, and I'm not even going to try this stuff. That's okay as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I make that super clear in the book. And sometimes when you're doing step 1, research, learn, and educate, you might realize that thing I thought was really alluring and I was very interested in actually comes with a lot of risks. And I'm now no longer going to try it because I am educated. And so I think that the education piece is what helps you make an informed decision to, hey, I've seen that alcohol and these things come with risks. I'm not interested. So learning, but I think the education piece is important because then you're choosing out of a place of education. You're not choosing out of a place of stigma.
Exactly.
Stigma.
Yeah.
Stigmatization.
You're not making. So you're making a choice. Like I said, my book is about making choices out of a place of courage and trust and hope, not out of making choices out of fear and loathing and fear of sin.
Exactly.
Any other points for slow and steady wins the race?
I also have in this section just checking in with your mental health. There's a depression questionnaire in this section. I think slowing down and really thinking about where you are personally during this process, not just, what are my parents thinking of me? What am I going to do next? But pausing and slowing down to think, am I going through some mental health issues right now? And if I am, I need to take care of that. I need to make a plan to address what I'm facing, because I think it's really easy to, as you're leaving Mormonism, to just try to get away as quickly as possible and have it over with. But sometimes that can lead to repressing these really awful feelings and not engaging with them. So I have a portion where I talk about, if we think sometimes that if time passes, that's the same as healing. If 365 days pass, we have 365 days of healing, of mental health healing. And I think often, if you're like me, I think I'm more prone to repressing and trying to stay away from bad feelings. Often time passing does not have anything to do with healing. You have to make the active choice to heal and to feel your bad feelings, to allow yourself to process the bad feelings, to accept that losing the faith of your whole lifetime is really hard. And so just in this section too, to pause and really ask, am I going through a mental health crisis? Because I think a lot of people are, but instead they find outlets to heal them or to, self-medicate that are really unhealthy. And so recognizing if you are going through a mental health crisis or if you are having mental health problems, it's really good to pause and take it slow and be careful and seek help instead of rushing to just leave the church and get it over with and put it all behind you.
Love it. And then you've got this final tip, the places you'll go.
Oh, yes. I said the page. Maybe I'll read it. It's on page 106. Okay. In a 2016 conference session, M. Russell Ballard asked the members struggling with their faith, "Where will you go?" The talk asserts there is no place to find truth and happiness outside the Mormon doctrine. His talk is a warning to those who are tempted to leave. This question reminds me of what a parent might say when a little child threatens to run away. Dr. Seuss addressed the same topic in one of my favorite children's books. While Ballard hopes to cast fear into the hearts of those listening to his talk, Seuss does the opposite. While Ballard asks, "Where will you go?" Dr. Seuss wrote, "Oh, the places you'll go." The real world is not a terrifying hellscape of unhappiness. Instead, it's full of endless possibilities. And while the character in Oh, the Places You'll Go has to climb mountains and face adversity, it makes him better. It helps him grow. Stepping outside the church is intimidating, but worth it in exchange for the growth and discovery. As Dr. Seuss wrote, you have brains in your head, you have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself in any direction you choose. You're on your own, you know what you know, and you are the guy who'll decide where to go. Do not take M. Russell Ballard's question as a warning. Take it as a challenge. Where will you go? Oh, the places you'll go. Who will you be? What can you accomplish outside the limiting beliefs and narratives the church perpetuates? Where will you travel? Who will you meet along the way? What books will you read? What ideas will you discover? Who will you become? As I reflect on who I was as a church member, I see a life marked by a constant desire to be the best Mormon I could be. I discarded so many parts of myself, so many dreams and desires vanished in the face of Mormonism. Once I reframed leaving in my mind to take my experiences from where will you go to, oh, the places you'll go, everything changed. After 2 decades of rejecting my desires and identity, I could finally embrace myself without guilt or revulsion. I'm ready to answer Ballard's threatening question, where will you go? So to Elder Ballard and anyone with the same question, I'll go wherever I want to go.
Love
Wherever
that.
the fetch I want to
That's
go is
right.
where I'll
Wherever
go.
the hell I want.
Yes.
I love it. Well, Margie and I had the idea that maybe we're 5 in. Do you want to take a quick break
2
while
hours.
Okay, so we're going to give Alyssa a chance to have a quick little break. We're going to keep going. There's been a lot of comments that we're just going to share really quickly. First of all, we want to thank everyone who donates to Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation. Your donations are what makes this possible. So thank you if you're a regular donor. If you don't mind, I'm just going to say that if you value this content and you want to see it continue, you can go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button and become a monthly donor. And that's how we afford to do all that we do. So please support us if you don't. Other ways you can support us that are very meaningful, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel right now. Click the like button, click the subscribe button. You can also subscribe to us on TikTok, on Instagram, and on Facebook. Because that helps with the algorithms. And then sharing these episodes with people on social media can also be super useful. And then I do want to thank all of our Super Chat donors. For those of you who do join us live on YouTube, you can always donate there as well. Example is we plan on paying for Alyssa's flight here. But we need your donations to make that possible. So super thanks to Lauren Hewish for her Super Chat donation. We really appreciate that. Some other Super Chats I just want to share really quickly. Claire Jennings says, been binging, watching loads of episodes, not Mormon or ever been, but am so fascinated by it overall. So thanks, Claire. Thanks for that support. And that, I have to admit, that's one of the things I love most about Mormon Stories is that so many never Mormons tune in. Over half of our YouTube audience has never been Mormon. So I want to welcome all our never Mormons to this channel, to this podcast. Know that we're thrilled to have you here, and we're tickled that you find what we do useful. Daniel Eli writes, hi, love from an Eastern European Orthodox. How cool is that an Eastern European Orthodox is tuning into Mormon Stories podcast and finding value in it? So we welcome you. Nothing to Find writes, new year, new us, new thinking, and new choices. Yay. Thanks for joining us. Nothing to Find, and thanks for that wonderful comment. I'll just share a few more really quickly. Mindful Rochester writes, I appreciate this channel. I'm thinking about joining the LDS Church. Both ex and active members seem to have so much integrity and love. It really appears that the LDS community has a positive effect. So Mindful Rochester, thanks so much for reaching out. If you do end up joining the Mormon Church, I want you to come on the podcast and tell us how that is going for you and how that's working. We wish you the best in your decision. We're going to affirm whatever decisions people want to make. All right. Well, that's just a sampling of the wonderful comments. Please keep them coming. Keep those super chats coming if you're able to support us that way. I'll give a shout out to Trev Anon. Trev's joining us. He did time codes for about 1,100 Mormon Stories episodes. So Trev Anon, good to see you back. Thanks for joining us. All right. You're able to have your break. Alyssa
Thank you.
and Margie, you too.
Lip balm.
Lip
Thank you.
balm. All right. So we've done 5. I'll just say some people are like, John, these episodes are too long. I'll just say this. Probably the most ferocious thing that so many of our viewers and listeners say is that they value the time we take to thoroughly explore issues. And when it comes to leaving a high demand religion or a cult, it's going to take you years, if not decades, to process that. Mm-hmm. So we think a 3 or 4 hour, even a 4-hour episode is absolutely not long enough potentially to give you all that you need. So of course, we're going to recommend you buy this book right now, even How to Leave the Mormon Church to get way more support than you'll get out of a 3 or 4 hour episode. But we know that for those of you in the thick of it, 3 or 4 hours is not nearly enough of the support that you need. So that's why we're going long. That's why we're only 5 points into her 10 points. And now we're at point 6, Alyssa.
Yes. So point 6 is about sex and sexuality. And this is, I think, the longest chapter in the book because this is the number one thing I think the Mormon Church really does a number on, men and women. And a chapter that I share was the most difficult for me to write because I still feel like this is my number one place of struggle, of difficulty, and just stigma. And so this chapter, I think, is filled with, I have a story from my friend who is a lesbian and she just got engaged. Congratulations. And she was raised Mormon. And so her story is about, what she went through growing up with those feelings. And then I also have a story from a friend who grew up gay in the church, and he also is now in a loving relationship and marriage with his spouse. So their stories are really great in the chapter. And I wanted to add the stories and the voices of people from the queer community who are really at the front lines of the repression and stigma that the church places on sexuality. So the book starts, or the chapter, I talk about consent and what consent is. I think the church doesn't teach anything about consent at all. And so even the idea, I think, is prevalent that marriage is consent, that when you're married, you consent to sexual relations, at any time. You don't need consent at any given time, but that marriage itself is consent. And so I talk about how to get consent, how to give consent, and how to kind of think through if you do want to consent to something. I also talk about exploring sexuality, that is very easy, I think, to assume you're a heterosexual person or to have repressed for so long anything that falls along the spectrum of sexuality outside of heterosexuality. So because you've repressed those feelings for so long, it's very difficult to engage with them at any level, even after leaving. I don't think leaving the church is synonymous with being ready to accept any part of your sexuality or becoming healthy sexually. It's very easy to continue having really significant hang-ups about these things. And so talking about how you should spend time around people who make you feel accepted and loved and happy. I also included a glossary of terms
which I love.
Yeah. I feel like you don't really learn how to speak kind of this language. Like, what is the difference between someone who's pansexual or bisexual? What's transgender versus non-binary? Those are things you're not going to be educated about if you were raised in the church. And so there's a whole glossary about what these different terms mean: intersex, queer, polyamory, so that you can kind of at least start to understand these different categories of who different people or what they might identify as, and also just to give a name to it. I think people in the church, deep in the church, might have certain feelings, but never be even given the word to describe what those feelings are. And so learning about even just the definitions of what these things are can be really healing, because you can see yourself in them for some people.
Asexual is another one.
Yeah.
We live in, I think, a culture that just assumes everyone, So love it.
I also share the story about growing up, all the times that I was shown different women, like a woman like Britney Spears or the Spice Girls, and told that these women are bad women, they're dangerous, they're evil women, and how much I really began to feel that was something that I must be too. That if Britney Spears is evil because she's a woman and she dances in a certain way and she's a bad example, then if I have a body and if my body is a female body like her body, then my body must be bad too. Bless you. And so, so I think when you feel your body is a sin, when you feel your body is bad, it's very easy to have complete disinterest and almost disgust with sex and sexuality because it feels dirty. It feels bad. And so a lot of the chapter is about overcoming this feeling that sex and sexuality are inherently bad. I had a mission companion confide in me once that she, someday when she was going to get married, she would tell her husband that they would not have sex on their wedding night because she said, I cannot handle going from closed mouth kisses to having sex in 24 hours. I can't do it. And she said that she wanted to wait a week or two and build up to it and work towards having sex because the church says you shouldn't kiss someone in, at least when I was in the church, I don't know what they say now, but you should only kiss someone in the way that you'd feel comfortable kissing them in front of your parents, which is like a kiss on the cheek. Mm-hmm. I think when you're 18, I don't think you would even do a kiss on the lips in front of your parents. That would probably make you feel mortified. And so to expect, I think especially girls who are taught sex is so bad, to go from having no sex at all to a wedding night of sex is really unrealistic and also just fully setting them up for failure. Even the jokes about, I don't know if you've heard these jokes, I used to hear them all the time of people having sex in between the reception and the wedding and the reception because they couldn't wait. And I always thought those stories were creepy and chilling because the story is always told like they have sex in the car and, you know, for the guy, he, you know, it's probably over in seconds because he's so excited, and the pleasure of a woman is not part of the conversation at all. And that those stories just always to me were kind of horrifying and placed in this kind of humorous tone, like, oh, these kids are so excited to have sex. But then when I would talk to female friends about how scared they were to have sex, it was clear that those stories are actually really twisted and intimidating, that a girl would be told sex is horrible for her whole life, and then in between her temple wedding with the robes of the priesthood and her reception in the cultural hall, she is having sex with someone who also has probably never had sex before and having, likely for both of them, a very strange, weird, not healthy, not good experience, which is not what I think people deserve for their first time or for any time.
Absolutely.
Such a good point.
Yeah. All right. What else? What else you got for sex and sexuality?
I talk about the stigmas around masturbation, especially for women and men.
Mm-hmm.
Masturbation is shown to be healthy. It's a way to experience a sexual relief without relying on another person. Mm-hmm. I think Mormonism makes sexual satisfaction entirely reliant on another person's body. If you can't masturbate, then that means the only time you can experience sexual relief is if someone else consents to have sex with you, which means that another person is responsible for your sexual fulfillment and pleasure. Masturbation allows someone to take sexuality, their sex life, and at least into their own hands, in the sense that they don't have to go to another person and say, I need you to fulfill this desire for me because I am not permitted to fulfill it for myself, but rather to say, hey, I am responsible for my own sexual experience, and I can feel fulfilled, or and even that I own my own body. I can have pleasure in my own body, and that's okay, and that I don't have to rely on another person in order to have a sexual experience. Mm-hmm. I can have that sexual experience. I can feel sexual pleasure without being reliant on another person.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's a really tough one for Mormon minds to get behind, husbands and wives, that it's not super dangerous or bad or unleashing some sort of beast or monster into your relationship. So I think it's really powerful that a woman is advocating for this, because I think mental health professionals, this decades ago, it stopped being a question.
Right.
It's not even a question for like psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health professionals. But somehow in 2024, white collar global religions still haven't gotten the message and are tormenting children and youth and adults over something that mental health professionals say is just healthy, flat out healthy.
Yeah, and who does masturbation hurt, really? Like, where's the damage done is my question to the Mormon Church. Why are we stigmatizing this? What is the root sin at the heart of masturbation? I mean, I get alcohol. I can understand saying, hey, drinking can be addictive and can be dangerous. Masturbation, I don't know if we can really point to, I mean, besides maybe hurting your Mormon spouse because they've been taught that you shouldn't be engaging in that. But in a vacuum, I don't know if you can say, like, here's the part of masturbation that is so damaging that no one should participate in it. And I think, too, for the people who do, men and women, girls and boys who participate in it, the shame that comes out of that participation is so poignant and deep that some kids feel like they should end their life because they masturbate. That's wild and really sad. And I think it truly does not make sense to me. And I think it really makes it so that we have this semi-rape culture within Mormonism, which says, hey, if a man wants to feel sexual pleasure, he needs to find a woman who will give that to him. Because he cannot access that on his own.
That's right.
And so that is really damaging message to boys, because that makes it feel like I have these feelings I can't control, and the only avenue in which it is righteous to engage with sexual feelings is if I get my wife to have sex with me. And that means that I think it creates a culture within a marriage or within a dating relationship where the man is really looking to the woman, or even the woman to the man, to satisfy these feelings, instead of having permission to take ownership of their own body and say, I can be my own source of self-pleasure. I don't need to tell another person I can't get off unless you get me off. That is so much pressure to put on another person. And I think Mormonism, probably mostly by accident, creates that pressure within marriages and within relationships.
Again, I was talking to Natasha Helfer and an ex-Mormon sex worker the other day about a potential interview on Mormon Stories, and they both agreed that this idea that Mormon women are responsible to be the sexual release for their husbands, it's bad for the women, but it's also bad for sexual intimacy in a marriage, because a Mormon woman is going to start looking at sex as an aversive act if they view it as their duty to fulfill their husband's desires. It's called duty sex or obligation sex. And it is bad for someone who wants a healthy sexual relationship. Because if you want a healthy sexual relationship, you want your wife or husband wanting to have sex with you because it's pleasurable for them. But as soon as it becomes a duty, it becomes aversive. And if we talk about these Mormon sexless marriages where the couple goes, an entire month or multiple months without ever having sex, you can probably look at duty or obligation sex as one of the reasons it becomes something people just don't want to do. People want to give that not just voluntarily, but out of their own fulfillment and satisfaction. Yeah. And the other thing I'll say is that one of my favorite ideas within Mormonism is this idea of woe unto those who call evil good and good evil. If we can just know that masturbation's healthy for mental health reasons, to prevent rape and assault, we're calling something good evil. And the only other thing I'll say is we know that sexual repression leads to extreme behaviors and harmful behaviors. So that's something, evil that we're calling good. And so we just need to swap our ideas on sexuality, not to become irresponsible people, but actually to have the outcomes we want. What we want is healthy individuals, healthy relationships, less toxic sexual behavior, less rape, less assault, less mental illness. And that comes about by having healthy sexuality.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I think that's like summarizing the chapter perfectly, as that Mormonism really doesn't permit you to have a healthy sexual relationship with your own body. I think that's on top, we wear garments, but also just the idea that our bodies, the things that we physically carry with us throughout the world are inherently bad, that masturbation, orgasming, that's bad. And it's only good in a very, very specific heterosexual, monogamous temple marriage.
Legally married,
yes. That unless those boxes are checked, any other sort of sexual activity or expression is evil. And that describes so many people that fall outside of the heterosexual married norm that it really demonizes. I mean, I even have memories as a kid, my parents talking to me about how two people were living together and not married and how that was really bad. And I had an aunt who was living with her. She's been with this person still. I mean, we're for over 20 years. She's been in a committed relationship. She has kids with this man. They're just not legally married. And as a kid, I saw her differently. And my parents taught me to see her differently because she wasn't married. She was living in sin. And I think when sexuality and sex become so specific about what's okay and what's not, it really alienates and demonizes so many people that it's very difficult to engage with sexuality as a member of the church, or even to, even admitting you're gay or embracing being gay is very difficult for people. And the same, I think, goes with pornography. I have a section within the chapter about that. I wasn't willing to watch pornography till I think I was out of the church for 5 years. It was a very long time before I was willing. I used to, even after we left the church, I used to ask my husband constantly, like, do you watch pornography? I still kept this
policing.
Like, you are cheating on me if you do that, and I have to police you to make sure you don't kind of attitude. And I remember the first time I watched it, it was literally just to see what it was. And I remember feeling, and my husband Jackson had also said, like, it's naked people having sex. That's what pornography is. Like, of course there are like really wild things, but like most of pornography is people having sex. And there's no way pixels moving on a screen is going to be the same as my intimate, personal, human relationship with you. And not for any man, I think, or like most men, I assume. That if presented with, would you rather watch pornography right now, or would you rather have sex with this person you're interested in? I think most people are going to choose the real person. And that's for a reason, because ultimately pornography does not have these mystical tendrils that attach to people in this demonic way that the church depicts.
Unless you tell them that porn is going to have that power
Yes.
before they view it.
Is it
and
that
then
the
you've created
placebo?
that association.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think if you've been
Yes.
trained, and if you've been trained to think it's really
You'll
bad.
never get it out of your mind.
And keep
Once
it
you
secret.
see it, you'll never get it out of your mind. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah,
Right?
I think it really is. And I think making it so, I actually had this person message me on TikTok about how the church saved his life because he watched pornography and he realized he was a pornography addict, and he talked to his bishop and he was thinking about ending his life, and he prayed a lot and the church helped him overcome this. And all I could think was, maybe the church is what created this problem to begin with for you. Most young boys, most men, I don't think of ending their lives because they watch pornography. But I think the church creates the problem that then it aims to solve by becoming closer to God, by becoming, going through these deprogramming, like, pornography, don't they have programs that you can go through with the bishop about like stepping away from pornography, ending your addiction, and women who I think are told that, I think it's very common to hear that if men, like all men watch porn, and if they tell you that they're not watching porn, they're lying to you. And that this creates within a marriage a very deep-seated level of mistrust, because no matter how much the man might say within a Mormon marriage, I'm not watching pornography, the woman has heard he's lying to you. And so you can never trust your spouse. You never really, like, if you trust ultimately the church over your spouse, which I think a lot of members do, and if the church tells the woman, don't ask your husband or your partner, don't ask this person if you watch porn, ask them when they last watched porn, and they say, I don't, you don't believe them. You just are taught not to believe them. And so I think leaving the church, you still carry all these stigmas with you about pornography. And the first time I watched it, I think I just realized, yeah, this actually doesn't hold a candle to my real life relationship with my partner who I love and have had kids with and am intimate with. Like, there's no comparison, but the church would have you believe that pornography is so powerful and so addictive that it doesn't hold, like, your relationship doesn't hold a candle to pornography, that the pornography is what your husband is really in love with. And I think that probably does exist within some people. I think that is some people's lived experience. But I think the vast majority of men and women, if asked, would you rather watch pornography or would you rather have sex with your partner who you're in a committed, loving relationship with? Most would say, I'd rather have sex with my partner, because human connection and human sex, human sexuality is ultimately, from me, my opinion, way better than pornography. Yeah. And most of the fear-mongering about pornography comes from people who've never actually watched pornography, or maybe who have only heard about it in rumors from other members. And so I think pornography is one of the Mormon boogeymen that we are afraid of, because we assume that it has this ungodly, no pun intended, hold on people that, like the bishop story from yesterday, agency no longer exists when pornography is on the computer. It truly, like the devil does, has a grip on the mind of men and potentially women, and that it's an addiction, versus that pornography is something to consume with intention, something to consume being careful, being considerate, knowing the risks, knowing about consent, knowing about, making sure creators are compensated correctly. There are websites dedicated to ethical porn creation you can find. Using that type of risk assessment versus assuming that pornography is point blank bad, especially if you've never even seen it. Yeah. It truly it's so powerful.
Yeah, and I'll just add that some people get mad and comment or email and say, I can't believe Mormon Stories is pro-pornography. That's not a fair depiction of what's going on here. What we are is pro-health. And Colby Reddish just made the point that the way the Mormon Church talks about and deals with pornography is way more harmful than the pornography itself. And I'll just add that I've told this story many times, that if you were to chart my personal pornography viewing, it absolutely tanked the day that I told Margie that I sometimes had looked at pornography. And eventually, when she got to the point where she was able to say, you know what, that's your business. I'm not going to track it anymore. I don't want you to tell me about it. It's no big deal. What Margie said to me is, let's have the best healthy sexual relationship that we can. And what you do as far as that other stuff goes is just it's not her job. Mm-hmm. And my point isn't that means we're pro-pornography. I'm trying to tell you that if you are a believing Mormon spouse that wants to minimize your spouse's use of pornography, then take the power out of it by saying it's no big deal. and then work to just have the healthiest sexual relationship that you can, I promise you that once it's no longer taboo and forbidden, the person is going to have less interest in it, because literally making it forbidden, making it a huge deal, making it exotic and naughty actually increases the person's attraction to it. And destigmatizing it and making it not a big deal just makes them less interested in it. And that's just how the brain works. So don't call us pro pornography, call us pro healthy relationships. That's what this whole, in my opinion, pornography discussion really should be about.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that when we allow these things to have so much power over us, I think it's this what I experienced when I viewed pornography for the first time is what I experienced when I drank my first cup of coffee, which is, that's all. That's the boogeyman. That's the man behind the curtain. That's it. It doesn't hold a candle to, how often do you hear from the church pulpit them talking about real, actual things in the world that are truly horrible and harmful? The idea that coffee and a second piercing, that's morality. Not watching R-rated movies, that's my relationship with Jesus. That's how I get closer to God, is by not showing my shoulders. That's crazy. That me showing my shoulders is what we're talking about before we're talking about the ills of homelessness or why we need more soup kitchens in the world, or how we can go out into our communities and support, people who are refugees who have recently come into America. You don't hear those things talked about in the pulpit. You hear the double piercing, the shoulders, the no coffee, these tiny little rules that in reality cause no, I think, in my opinion, real damage. And I do think some pornography is really horrible. I think some pornography should not be viewed or created. I just think education, which is another main cornerstone of the book, education is what empowers you to make a courageous choice, a hopeful choice. Education is what helps you make an ethical choice. If you're making a choice out of fear, I've never seen pornography, I know it's evil, and I'm afraid of it, so that's how I'm going to make choices about my sex life, that's not going to lead to a healthy spot.
Yeah.
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 I have to just say a couple more things. I appreciate one of our viewers just wrote, I'm always torn between just letting a guest talk and sometimes Margie and I providing input. A guest just wrote, John has all this info in his mind. I'm so glad he keeps going. He's a vault of information and been through it. And I just want to thank Thundersnow for that support, because I do love to just give the mic to my guest. But sometimes Margie and I have been through a lot. And one of the things I've been through is being a therapist and seeing in a married couple what happens when a couple gets married without ever having sex. And then they find out either one has no sex drive at all, which is called asexuality, or at least attraction to another partner. Or no libido. Those are separate things, but both can happen. You can either have no sexual attraction to anyone, including your partner, that's asexuality, or have no libido. And then you're in a marriage, but because you never had sex or lived together before marriage, you don't find that out until you've committed to be with each other for eternity. And that's just a fundamental incompatibility that for some is fine. Two non-libido or asexual people can have a great marriage. But if one has a super high sex drive and the other one has no sex drive, that can be a deal killer. And you don't want to find that out after you've had a bunch of kids and you've committed to be together for an eternity. Yeah. So again, this idea of calling good evil and evil good, to a Mormon, premarital sex is literally next to murder in evil.
Yeah.
But to some people, getting married to someone who you're fundamentally incompatible with and not attracted to, and finding that out after you've made the commitment to have kids, that's awful. That's horrible. That's evil, in my opinion.
Or irresponsible, this idea that there's this whole part of a person that's completely unexplored and off limits, and there's a whole part of yourself, you're like, well, I can't help you. I don't know, because you're cut off from that piece of yourself as well. Yeah. You know, just like really essential data is missing from yourself and from the partner and from the relationship, because you have no sense without a sense of those two things. How can you speak for the sexual compatibility for the relationship?
Yeah, there's super religious people that, because they don't explore sexually at all before marriage, they discover after they're married that they're gay or lesbian.
Yeah.
Like, how would you like to be married to someone of the opposite sex who's only attracted to people of their own sex and not attracted to you? You don't want to marry that person. You don't want your kid to marry that person.
Yeah.
You want that person marrying someone they're attracted to. And how do you find that out? By exploring sexually. And so, and also, how many horrible stories have I heard of a faithful Mormon person that found the love of their life and they just happened to not be Mormon? But then they said, well, you're not going to take me to the temple, so I'm going to go marry someone that is not the love of my life, and then spend the rest of my life wishing that I'd married the actual love of my life. And then they lose their faith, and they're like, oh my gosh, I gave up true love for something that now I don't even believe in. Like, all of these things are just additional examples of how the Mormon Church's teachings about sex and sexuality can be super damaging and toxic.
Yeah. I mean, what messes up your life more than having an incompatible marriage? Like, having a marriage with someone, having a home with them, having kids with them, and that you've gone on this path purely because you're really trying to do the good Mormon thing, and then 4 kids in, realizing this is not who I am, I'm deeply unhappy. That's damage for sure. It reminds me of, I was listening to the episode with Stacy of Studio C, how his bishop suggested to him that he should just marry marry a woman.
Even though he's gay.
Even though he's gay.
Yeah.
And Stacy was like, how could I do that to another person? How could I do that to a woman? How could I marry her knowing this is who I am? Mm-hmm. And the idea that a bishop would suggest that and encourage that is, I think, illustrates how much Mormonism plays its role into people's marriages and into people's choices to marry young, to marry who they do. And that sets them on this path for large amounts of heartache and failure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I talked to in the book about, I call it the commitment obsession, that ex-Mormons struggle from, an obsession with commitment, with dating, when I think as members, Mormons were so trained to think of marriage all the time, that even as ex-Mormons, when we meet someone new, when we're dating, it's easy to really quickly escalate into, okay, when are we going to pair off? When are we going to get engaged? When are we going to get married? This is where we're supposed to be. And in talking with my friends who have never been members, they're very happy to, let's date, let's get to know each other. Let's take this as quickly or slowly as we need to, but that just casually dating is much easier for non-members. I think new ex-members might struggle with dating non-members or never members because ex-members might still be on this obsession with, I need to get married, I need to get married. This is what a relationship is for marriage. A relationship is meant to prepare you for marriage, whereas the never Mormon might be thinking, my worldview is to date for a while, to maybe live with each other. Maybe we'll break up, that's okay, that's how relationships go, live and let live. And I think that disconnect can set people up for a lot of heartache, because if the ex-Mormon is like, let's get married as soon as possible, I'm thinking about marriage when we're casually dating, and the other person is, I'm not going to think about marriage till we've lived together for a few years, that's a huge disconnect. Yeah. And so if as you're dating someone, as an ex-member, you're thinking a lot about commitment, you're thinking a lot about, we need to pair off, we need to get engaged, we need to get married, just recognizing where that comes from, and not that those feelings are bad, not that that's what you shouldn't do with relationships, but that might come from a pretty Mormon place, and that you might have to explain that or work through that with your girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever you're dating, and discuss what that means for your relationship.
Love it.
Yes, I love that. And I also love that you bring up the point of, I think our culture and religion is very couple-centered. And I remember your chapter, I believe, brings up this idea of, do you want to be part of a couple? Like, it is absolutely valid to say you want to remain single in your life. That's not something that you feel really honors you as a person. And I love that you bring that up as part of the exploration.
Yeah, I think there's so much of a perfect model set up in Mormonism for how you're supposed to date, who you're supposed to date, what that dating is supposed to look like, that it's very difficult stepping out of that to have a new romantic relationship or not have a romantic relationship and figure out for the first time, what do I want, which is what the whole book is about. What do I want? And if I'm motivated by these different aspects of Mormonism and these are still playing out in my mind, how do I examine them and ask which pieces are really me? Which pieces do I still value? Which values do I want to hold close? And which parts of these are just still the taboos and stigmas planted in me by Mormonism that I need to get rid of? And weeding out what the difference between those things are.
Yeah.
Maven, this is ultimate Mormon blasphemy, I believe, but Maven writes, stats show that single, childless women are happier than their married peers on average. And I do know it's an absolute fact that there are people that aren't happy being a parent. They're told to be a parent, they have their kids, and they're miserable. And maybe they knew that beforehand, but they just did it because they were told. And how in the world is it good to bring children into this world who then you abandon because you want to die because you did something that you fundamentally don't enjoy doing? So like the as much as I love my kids and love being a dad, the option of being childless is absolutely a legitimate one as well.
Yeah, and I think to my last point for sex and sexuality was, I think for women, it can be especially difficult to learn to date actively instead of passively. As a Mormon woman, you, especially, I mean, from how I was raised, and I think very traditionally, you don't ask men on dates, you are asked.
You're pursued.
And you're pursued, never pursuing. And so in leaving, I think empowering women to pursue and to think of who they're looking for. And when they find that person, not just hoping to be approached, but learning to be more proactive and say, I have a voice too here. I don't want to just accept whoever is pursuing me, but I also want to take the position of the pursuer and say, I found someone I'm interested in, I'm going to go after them. And I can fill that role for myself too. I deserve, if I meet someone I'm interested in, I deserve to pursue them in the same way men are taught to pursue women. And so having that as a value too, I think for women is kind of alien, but also really important as you're dating to say, I get to be in the driver's seat in my own finding a romantic partner.
Love it. Well, we could do an entire year's worth of episodes on sex and sexuality, but that's a really good exploration in 20 or so minutes. So we've got 4 more, right?
Yes.
All right.
4 more.
Number 7?
Number 7 is about substances, and I think we've already covered a lot of the kind of theory behind this, which is being informed. You never have to try any of this if you don't want to. The idea that it's okay to learn and educate yourself about substances, and that might lead you to decide you're disinterested, they're not for you. That might lead you to decide you are interested, but that especially with something like substances, which so many people want to try substances, so many people are interested in, but coming out of the church, you have almost zero education about. And it's very crucial to educate yourself and to read as much as you can and talk with people and really understand the risks and the rewards of what you're choosing to get yourself into when it comes to drinking alcohol, when it comes to tobacco use even, or when it comes to cannabis. All of these things are things that people, especially I think millennials and younger, are really drawn to and interested in, but coming out of the church aren't probably going to be set up for success in healthy use necessarily. So a lot of this chapter begins with make sure that you are being really careful, make sure you're learning, make sure you're becoming educated. If you can, experiment or try with someone who has done it before so they can lead you through the process, so they can help you stay safe. And 2, understanding that they're within, I think, substance use, there's a lot of shades of gray of morality, of it can be a slippery slope. Addiction is very real. A lot of people in the church who have left are in a really vulnerable place, and so, but still want to try substances. So how do you bridge this gap of being in a vulnerable place, not having a lot of education, but still wanting to try psychedelics for the first time? And education, I think, and learning and understanding what these substances are is going to help you figure out if you're ready or if you should wait till you're in a better place.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, go. You were going to go.
Yeah, so I cover, the main substances I cover are coffee, which is a funny drug, because most people don't consider it a drug, but Mormons do. So coffee, and each section talks about the drug. It talks about how to order it or how to find it for the first time, risks of that specific substance, what to watch out for, how to keep yourself from getting even too much caffeine at once can make you feel really nauseous. Too much drinking at once is dangerous. So how to kind of safeguard against overuse, how to sample consciously and carefully, how to order a cocktail at a bar for the first time. Even just approaching a bartender for me, the first time was really scary, really intimidating. And so how to choose a bar that, is not really busy, choose a bar that's really calm and quiet so that you don't have to, a lot of bars are really crowded. At least for me, as someone with some social anxiety, if I go into a crowded bar, I'm not going to be the one that's like pounding on the table, asking for the drinks. I'll just leave. So talking about some of these things that might make you feel afraid to try for the first time and how to make it enjoyable experience, an exciting and fun experience, and not something that's bad or intimidating or something that you just ultimately give up on despite having a curiosity about it.
Yeah. Let's talk quickly about psychedelics, because I know growing up, alcohol, it's sort of upside down, because alcohol was taught to be kind of the safest of all possible substances, in the sense that it was legal and it was allowed. But then, like, if somebody's doing LSD or mushrooms, now they've gone way too far. Weed's way worse than alcohol, according to the Mormon brain.
Right.
And mushrooms and LSD are off the edge.
That's basically like heroin.
Yeah.
I thought heroin and mushrooms and cocaine, those are all just such heinous drugs that they're all in the same category.
And the truth is, isn't alcohol the most dangerous drug by far?
Yeah, at least as far as deaths go and addiction goes, alcohol is the worst, but it's also the most normalized. So
right.
It's way easier to say, I'm out of the church, let me try a glass of wine. That feels way less stigmatized, way easier than let me trip on LSD, even though there are no deaths associated with psychedelic use that are associated with the drug itself. Potentially maybe a mental health issue might play in, but as far as like overdosing on alcohol, pretty easy. Drinking while driving, a lot of people do it and kill themselves or kill the people who they're in an accident with. And tobacco is worse in many ways than alcohol. It's even more addictive. Addictive. It's more addictive.
And I don't think anybody's ever overdosed on cannabis or mushrooms. I literally think it's impossible. I mean, there's
this lady took like 300 times the dose of LSD that you're supposed to, and she was fine. She just, I think they had her in the hospital just to make sure she was okay, but she didn't die. She didn't have long-term effects. So those substances are they're potent for sure, and LSD and mushrooms are also proven to stop addiction. A lot of times people use them as a way to end a tobacco addiction, to end an alcohol addiction. They have the opposite effect of a lot of other drugs, where you try alcohol and you want some more. For many people, you try psychedelics and it trains your brain to no longer need those other addictive substances.
And to be clear, we're not encouraging illegal behavior, and we're not even encouraging psychedelic use per se. I do think they can be overused or misused, and they're illegal. So, of course, the book How to Change Your Mind and other movies and public figures are trying to encourage, like with Johns Hopkins University, responsible, medically supported uses of these substances. So we want to destigmatize that, because there may be cool opportunities for health and enlightenment. But what we are, so we're not for psychedelics or against it. We're for education, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And educated use. And if you're going to do it anyways, if it's something you're curious about and interested in, that education is the way to safeguard against mishaps and self-discovery and knowing yourself, knowing, am I in a mental health crisis because I just left the church, or am I in a good spot and I am ready to have a very concerted and conscious exploration. And those are two very different places to be. And I wanted to read in the book, I have a quote from Sam Harris, who I really like. He has an essay called Drugs and the Meaning of Life. He's a neuroscientist. And I think it's a pretty brief quote, but his summary of all these different substances I think is really spot on. He says, I have 2 daughters who will one day take drugs. Of course, I will do everything in my power to see that they choose their drugs wisely. But a life lived entirely without drugs is neither foreseeable nor, I think, desirable. I hope they someday will enjoy a cup of morning coffee or tea as much as I do. If they drink alcohol as adults, as they probably will, I will encourage them to do it safely. If they choose to smoke marijuana, I will urge moderation. Tobacco should be shunned, and I will do everything in the bounds of decent parenting to steer them away from it. Needless to say, if I know that either of my daughters would ever eventually develop a fondness for methamphetamine or crack cocaine, I might never sleep again. But if they don't try a psychedelic like psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms, or LSD at least once in their adult lives, I will wonder if they had missed one of the most important rites of passage a human being can experience. So I just love how he goes through this checkbox of all these different substances that are popularized within, culture, and essentially says, if you're going to try one thing, consider psychedelics. And I echo you. Psychedelics are still illegal in the United States. They're decriminalized, I think, in parts of Colorado and maybe a few other places. But
I know the psilocybin has been legalized in Oregon.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So there are, kind of like cannabis. There's some states, some places where it's still federally illegal, but at the state level, it's legal. And in my experiences between LSD and mushrooms, I feel have been very, very transformative in my self-identity, in my self-concept, and just in my confidence in how I view myself and the world around me. And I think as the first time I tried magic mushrooms, it was maybe a year or 2 out of the church, and we were living in New York, and I just felt such a supreme sense of peace that I had really never experienced before. And what I loved is how much that stayed with me, how much it changed my perspective and point of view after the experience as well, still to this day. And so, like alcohol is very fleeting, even coffee is very fleeting. You need it pretty quickly again to give you your energy back, or you need to drink a lot if you want to get drunk. I think psychedelics, like he says in the book, even trying just once can be a very life-altering and introspective experience that I don't think is for everyone, but I think if you're someone that's interested in it, I think especially as a woman who has a lot of shame around my body, as a woman who was raised to not really believe in herself, it really helped me work through a lot of these deep-seated beliefs that I had about myself that I wanted to change. And that's what I loved the most about, and have loved as I've sampled psychedelics, once every 6 months to a year since.
Yeah. Yeah. And they can be misused and abused. So just be educated and be thoughtful about it. And check out the book, How to Change Your Mind. It's a great overview. And, whether it's PTSD or depression or, anxiety or other types of significant mental health disorders, get educated on whether that might be something that could help you, because Johns Hopkins and many other universities are actively researching psychedelics as a way to treat, even MDMA as a way to treat.
Yeah.
Or ketamine is becoming a big treatment that is used within medical communities to treat depression. So
Yeah. So get educated.
yeah. So point number 8 is about identity, which is at the core of everything we've already talked about. And I think is something that deserves a lot of time and effort spent rebuilding after you leave the church, especially I think for someone who was all in 100% type of Mormon. Having an identity devoid of Mormonism feels like, I think for me, it felt like I lost my identity completely. Everything about me was always constructed around how to be a good Mormon. And so after I lost my testimony, it felt like, if I'm not Mormon, what am I?
Yeah.
I'm nothing. I have nothing left. And it can feel like ground zero in a lot of ways. And I talk in the book about one thing that really empowered me after I lost my testimony was reclaiming my body back, which sex and sexuality is one way. But I think too, as soon as within a few months of leaving, I got this piercing, which feels like a very small thing, I think, to a lot of people.
To the top of your ear for those who are listening.
It's very, most people are, piercings are fun and not a second thought in most communities, most cultures. But for Mormons, especially Mormon women and Mormon men too, no piercings for men, one set for women. And I always wanted to have a piercing, have more piercings in my ears. And so
you got something in your nose, right?
And I have a nose ring and I have one here. And I love that. And wearing my tank top right now, these are ways that I show and prove to myself that my body belongs to me, that I am the master of my soul and I get to choose what happens to my body, and that I've had people comment like, I think tattoos are so ugly, and I don't care. I love
It's not
them.
for you.
It's not for you.
Do you have a tattoo?
I have 3 tattoos, yeah. My first tattoo was a J because my husband's name is Jackson, and
that's commitment, by the way.
Yeah. Well, he got his ring. I didn't get a ring because I like my ring, so his is even more commitment. But and then I have a sun. You probably can't see it very easily on the mirror, but on the camera. But I love taking my body back for myself. I think as someone who hated wearing garments, as someone who always was hyper conscious of wearing modest clothing, being able to say, my body belongs to me, truly to me, not to God, not to my husband, but to me, it has been one of the most rewarding aspects of leaving the church, is saying, if I want to put a hole in my nose right here and then put a ring through it, that is my choice to do. And I don't care if it's ugly to everyone else in the world.
Because I'm not asking you.
I'm not doing it for you. It's not for you. It's for me.
That's right.
And I think, so I talk about, and two, I wanted to read, I have a story from a friend who is a man, and how the Mormon male image impacted him, that I wanted to read, that I think is really kind of insane that this is what he grew up with. So let me read it. This is Levi's story. It says, the church places far fewer restrictions on men, but we're still taught that we represent the Savior. This comes with a strict style guide. If your Sunday shirt isn't white, you can't bless the sacrament. Leaders can't wear bow ties. No earrings, no tattoos. Avoid the appearance of evil. A hot chocolate in a Starbucks cup is as bad as coffee. This constant focus on appearance and what others think can fuck anyone up. I grew up in Utah, where most Mormon boys have straight blonde hair, a smooth white face, a slender build ideal for running. I have dark curly hair, a face speckled with freckles, and a naturally stocky body, gifts from my dad's Scottish ancestry and my mom's Polynesian roots. In my elementary school, I remember looking at my friends' skinny ankles, their socks stretched around their Achilles tendons, leaving gaps on either side. They looked spry and agile. My ankles filled my socks like a cupcake in its liner. Their calves were slender, mine were thick and beefy. I wondered if more girls would like me if I looked like the other boys. I felt ashamed of my body and wanted to cover my legs. From ages 11 to 27, I didn't wear shorts. I avoided pool parties. Our apartment complex had a very nice community pool during my senior year of high school. I never used it. Reminders of my differences weren't always from Reminders of my differences weren't always from inside of my head. As a 17-year-old priest, the bishop emphasized my distinctive curly hair by comparing me to animals in front of the other boys: alpaca, llama, poodle, sheep. Later, I found out that one of the other boys straightened his hair every morning. 10 years later, I left the church. I no longer believed I had to represent the Son of God or look like a typical example of a good Mormon boy. I felt more empowered to love myself for my differences. At 28 years old, and with much love and encouragement from my wife, I felt more secure than ever and bought my first pair of shorts as an adult. I chose a pair of bright red, extra short Adidas, and it was my way of plunging into the deep end. Now I believe my wife when she says she loves my curly hair, my thick legs, and broad build. People ask what my leg workout is. Girls use brow pens to draw fake freckles. K-pop stars get perms to have curly hair. So many of my differences are normal or desired when you look outside of the church. I don't need to look or dress like one of the 90-year-old apostles or their most dedicated followers to be a good person. I don't need to have runner's legs or be strong or have straight hair to be handsome. I've stopped wondering if Moroni's command to be perfect means I should look more like someone else. I only need to be enough for myself, and I am. So I loved that story because I think it's very easy for men to feel like potentially maybe like all of the Mormon shame around identity and image is placed on women, but I think there's still a really strict dress code for how men should look. No beards, no funky prints, no painted nails even, or foundation, or skincare, you know. So the hyper masculinity put on men is damaging too.
And whiteness.
Yes, and I think that's a huge part of his story, how he's getting ridiculed by the bishop for looking differently from the other boys because of his, you know, because he's Polynesian, has Polynesian ancestry. So that too, I think, is racism playing a role in how he is perceiving his identity as an individual.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think I also feel like as women and men reconstruct their identity, coming to terms with and learning to really love yourself and being the center of your own world, like we talked about, not looking to authority, not looking to a spouse for who you should be, but looking inward is really important. I think for women, learning to look, if they want it, for, you know, whatever leadership opportunities or power or presence or career or aspect of their life that they were always told that they couldn't have. I think that being empowered to feel that you can be the center of attention as a woman, that you can be important, that you can be good, that you can be the leader is something that's really difficult to get over. Saying that your husband's job is more important than your job, or saying that you know, you're never going to be the main character, you're always the side character, even in your own life, is really damaging, I think. And so I talk about that as well, just being confident enough to take up space in a room and not trying to be, you know, the church's version of women, which is that the men are on the stand, the men are blessing the sacrament, that the men are the ones with the ultimate power, and that women should look and follow their husbands, look and follow their male leaders, but that women can play that role too outside of the church. And learning to fill that role for yourself, and learning to even just fill that role in your own life and being self-led is really important to reconstructing a self-fulfilled identity.
One of our viewers is sort of asking the question, why is it okay? Why are piercings and tattoos discouraged, but plastic surgery, Botox, breast implants, etc., are totally not ever criticized? They're almost like, I don't know, approved of or encouraged. Any theories on why certain types of body alteration that makes you fit the idealized gender form,
Stereotype.
why they're okay, but piercings and tattoos aren't? Any theories on that, women?
I would say my theory is just, first, I think that in a lot of ways, plastic surgery goes towards looking more like the ideal woman, and men are not going to have a problem with that. If a woman has bigger boobs and fewer wrinkles, I don't think men are going to say, "Can you please stop that?" Whereas I think a lot of men don't like a non-traditional look, like color in your hair, piercings, tattoos. Those are untraditional and ugly. Potentially, not all men think that, but at least for Mormonism, I think if you're doing something as a woman, which, I mean, breast implants, that's surgery. Like, that involves going under the knife. That's more dangerous than a piercing, but it's not discouraged because ultimately Mormon morals have nothing to do with true risks or true harm. It's all about the fake morality of how to be perfect. And so I think it's not about...
Or how to
hey,
fill your role.
yeah,
right?
how to fulfill your role. So it's not about, hey, surgery is actually more dangerous than a tattoo. It's about that surgery is going to make you look more like the ideal. And so we have nothing to say about it. No comment.
Yeah, for me, I feel like, first off, I think this is a kind of nuanced topic, right? So I'm very pro women doing things that make
Absolutely.
themselves
Yeah.
feel more like themselves and in more of a healthy place. So I want to say that first off. But to your question, to me, it feels like one thing that's understandable to me is this idea of when women are valued the way they're valued within the church, I do think perfectionism can appearance is part of that. I think my understanding is it's its own thing kind of in Utah, as opposed to some other places. That was definitely true where I lived. If I lived in other places versus coming to Utah, it felt like it's a different phenomenon here in Utah. So I would say the perfectionism piece for women and almost feeling insecure or like you don't have value unless you're perfect. And that physical form, of course, is the first thing we see. So I would say that. But also, it plays into kind of this belief that women, in Young Women's, I received conditioning around, I was like a gift to my husband. Like, my value was how attractive I was. And so that was something that, I was going to be a mom. I needed to be coupled. And so that piece of this idea of like, I'm a gift and I need to like create the best gift, the best version of, and the ultimate is to be wanted, is to be chosen. And so I think for many women, this is a way that it kind of preserves and optimizes being attractive and being looked at and admired and valued and chosen. And so it can play into some of those. That is just what came to mind for me.
I saw a study recently that women who are skinny get paid something like 20 or 30% more than their people who have the same level of qualifications but who are viewed as overweight or chubby or whatever. That skin, literally just being thin, can get you more money.
Absolutely.
And that, I think, also is part of, body modifications, boob jobs, nose jobs, whatever. It's this idea, I think, too, very common, like men are just allowed to age. Men are allowed to have wrinkles. If you look at a magazine cover of a man in his 50s and a woman in her 50s, the woman will be airbrushed like she's 20, and the man will be allowed to have wrinkles. And so I think women are often put in this place like what you're describing, that our value is being thin. Our value is being beautiful. Our value is conforming to this very ultra-traditional type of women, and never being allowed to age with grace, never being allowed to eat in a way that is instinctive, but rather eat to be as skinny as possible. And so I think I know this is a little off the rails with identity, I guess, but I think as a woman, you have to decide what that means to have a lot of messaging around this is how your body should look, not just from the church, but from social media as well. And you have to ask yourself, okay, do I buy that? Do I buy into the idea that being thin is inherently more attractive and good and worthwhile than, you know, even having a few extra pounds on you. And so I think, I don't know if this still ties in with the original question, but
I think it does. And I actually see it as core to identity, because this is part of the deconstruction
and your
around
body, how you own your body.
That's right. And part of the messaging. And to be fair, this is cultural as well. And for most of us, there can be a familial layering too around weight, femininity, like traditional gender roles. And so I just like to acknowledge how layered it is. And the more layered something is, often the more difficult it can be and involved to disentangle. But this is part of the journey of identity and making your body and your health and nourishment and all those things your own, as opposed to...
and not trying to look outside yourself and ask, well, what is everyone else doing? I'll do that because it's easier to just do what everyone else is doing, or outsource your decision making to something other than something from inside. And even for me, most of my friends are getting Botox at this point. I'm 31, and I haven't gotten Botox yet. And I'm really actively wrestling with this idea of, do I commit to this like $300 every 3 months procedure that I have to go in and have needles put in my face, or do I accept that gravity will cause my face to look differently than it did when I was 15, and that's okay, and that honestly, both outcomes, getting Botox, committing to this, or not getting Botox, committing to this, neither are desperately bad. Neither, but it's me to choose. I get to choose which of these two paths, which values I want to incorporate into my life. And so I'm currently wrestling with that. Do I want to have no wrinkles because I feel like that makes me more valuable as a person to other people, or do I want to have anti-aging procedures done because I'm going to feel more confident in my skin, and that's a good thing.
That's right.
And we have to decide, like, I think every person has to decide for themselves, what value do I hold most closely? And that's what will push me forward, versus I don't think I'm as valuable unless I have this. One choice is going to give me more value to other people, and the other choice will make me less valuable. So I will choose a choice based off of what other people think of me.
That's right. And even I feel like what's helpful is removing this sense of like ethics, or like, to be a moral person, I need to not get Botox. Like, now I'm superior because I think that is kind of part of where we come from is, you know, there's a right. And when I do the right, I'm better than you, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I still personally struggle with that. And I think a lot of people have to decide, you know, what, and I think for me, the place of morality of which decision I make comes more from, at this point in my life, wanting to make a choice that is most true to myself, and not a decision that I feel that I chose because I was pulled in either direction by an external force.
Right. That's so true. What I love about this topic being brought up too is, you know, it brings up this point of, for many of these things, it's not a one and done. Like, we're going to be on a journey with these things, most likely for a lot of our lives. Because I think sometimes there's a tendency to just kind of feel like that, get to the end, I'm healed. Let's get to the quick closure. Mm-hmm. But in truth, for most of us, that's the invitation, is that we will be doing this connecting and reflecting and editing ourselves so that we are being true to ourselves for the rest of our lives. And it's a gift to be able to do that.
And it's so hard to deprogram the idea that there's a right and a wrong.
That's right.
Because that is the only binary presented in Mormonism. And the idea that getting Botox or not getting Botox, or wearing tank tops or not wearing tank tops, has nothing to do with right and wrong and everything to do with personal choice is a surprisingly difficult pill to swallow, I think, as an ex-Mormon.
That's right.
It has nothing to do with morality and everything to do with your personal identity. And that your identity in either choice has nothing to do with the reflection of you as a good moral person.
Nice. Very nice.
We did
Thanks for bringing that up.
No, that's good. No. Anything else on identity?
I think we covered most of it. I do think it's worth reading the book to get the full effect, though. But we can move to point number 9.
All right. Number 9.
Number 9 is building a new life and community outside of Mormonism. And I think as an ex-Mormon, in the book, I suggest finding two new communities as you've left the church. One is, I think it's really helpful to find a community of ex-Mormons. And it's important to find a community of, and I guess I'll say 3, a community of ex-Mormons who are supportive and can understand what you're going through, to keep your Mormon community as much as it is healthy and positive. Don't stay in a toxic relationship, but don't just throw away your relationships with members of the church if they're worthwhile and if they can be salvaged. And then third is to, if you can, this is maybe more difficult in Utah, find a community completely disconnected from Mormonism at all, which I do think is still possible. I think if you love Frisbee, a new community could be finding a really active Frisbee group to go throw the Frisbee around with. Yeah. Finding, what are your hobbies? Any hobby is going to have, whether it's online or in-person community that you can go be a part of. And being part of the beauty of Mormonism is being united in a common goal or a common dream or belief. And so finding a hobby or a pursuit or a goal or some activity that you feel passionately about, and finding other people who are also passionate about that, is going to fill a lot of that sense of community that gets left behind with Mormonism. And then I think too, an ex-Mormon community, I see a lot online people saying there's no ex-Mormon community in Michigan or Oregon, and if you, at least every time I look up a Facebook group, at least in major metropolitan areas, there's usually at least 1 or 2 on Facebook, and that's semi-active, that you can reach out to the person who organized the group and say, hey, are there any meetups? Just at least give it a shot. I think a lot of people assume, hey, I don't live in Utah, there's definitely no ex-Mormons around me. But inevitably, there almost always are, because there's a lot of us. And so it's worth going on Reddit and posting on the Ex-Mormon subreddit. It's worth going on Facebook and searching through Facebook groups, because I really think that some of my most affirming relationships have come from other ex-Mormons, because they really help you feel normalized and not crazy, and even just help you talk through some of your shared trauma and shared stigmatizations that you've had to deal with. And still to this day, most of my closest friends are ex-Mormons. So that's my plug for joining a community like that.
I'll just say that they've tried to isolate the most important ingredient for what makes churches and religions so successful or sought after, or when they've been able to make claims that religious people have slightly higher average levels of happiness than non-religious people, the active ingredient that they generally identify is community. And this is, in some sense, I wish I would put this topic first, not ninth, not that it matters at all. It's arbitrary, but like loneliness is deadly.
Yeah.
Loneliness is more dangerous than alcohol in terms of the mental health risks. Loneliness is horrible. And it's not easy to find find community if you're living in Seattle or Houston, and you just live in a random apartment and you don't know anybody, and especially if you're an introvert and you struggle to make friends. Loneliness is terrible, and community can be amazing. And so this topic of community is so important. It's why we created Thrive. You can go to thrivebeyondreligion.com. There's a Thrive event coming up in St. George in the first weekend of March 2024. Whether it's Mormon Spectrum, whether it's WACA, women of a certain age, check out that Facebook group. Whether it's a Faith Journey Meetup group on Facebook that has over 20,000 post-Mormon women. There's so many communities, and community is essential. And I agree, it can be a motorcycle club if you're into motorcycles. It can be bowling night, whatever it is. Yeah. Don't underestimate the importance of community. Even if you're an introvert, especially if you're an introvert, And the Ex-Mormon Reddit does a great job of listing community activities. And a really good community like thrivebeyondreligion.com, they'll provide you with the means to create a meetup group or a Facebook group or a community group if there isn't one. And they'll put up a big map of all the different communities all over the world that you can be a part of or you can add. But community's huge.
Yeah, I think it's easy to lose Mormonism, but then to never replace it with something.
Yeah.
And to just it's very difficult to find a new community. You have to put in the work, which Mormonism is like, it's so easy when you move to a new community. You go to the ward, you show up at the ward, the ward is there, they're ready to support you. It's so built in that it's easy. And even if you don't like your new ward, at least it's there. At least it exists, and as soon as you walk in the door, you understand the nuances, you understand what is expected of you to get a calling, to participate. And so in leaving, you do have to do the very difficult job of finding a new community and becoming part. But once you do, I think that it is very possible to have all of these benefits that came out of your Mormon community, but now coming from a place that is more accepting, is less stigmatizing of different aspects of your personality potentially, and hopefully is still fulfilling in the ways of connection that you experienced as a member. So I think it's very difficult to bridge the gap between losing Mormonism and finding a new community, but it's really worthwhile effort. And if you don't put in the effort, you will have this loneliness that you're describing. That so I think it's easy for people to stay home and say, I'll just watch TV. Please don't do that. I think you really have to put yourself out there in what might be a little painful, but no pain, no gain when it comes to finding that new community.
Some ex-Mormons join other churches, and that's okay. Some people say, well, the Catholic Church works for me, or the evangelical Christianity, there's South Mountain Church or K2. There's a ton of thriving churches. There's Unitarian Universalist churches if you don't want to have to deal with supernatural stuff or too much dogma and theology. The Unitarian Universalist churches, there's one in Salt Lake, downtown. There's one kind of in the, Cottonwood Heights area. There are others. There's a group called the Sunday Assembly, which is a secular church that comes out of the UK. And again, there's just nothing wrong with going to a less culty, less fundamentalist, more tolerant and inclusive church. To, give that a try. Don't be afraid. There's just a lot of options.
Yeah. And I think it's very worth boiling down what about my Mormon community was made me happy. What about it was fulfilling for me, and how can I reproduce that within another new community that is potentially where I'll fit in even better.
Where you may belong.
Or yes.
As opposed to like fit in.
Yes, belong versus fit in is a great distinction.
Yeah.
I also, in the book, talk about finding friends who really push my thinking or push my understanding of the world. I had a friend in New York who I went to her party, and she was walking around, and her two parents were there, and she was doing shots with her parents, which the idea, like for a Mormon mind, seeing a kid, a 20-something, doing shots with her parents was like mind-bending, and they were joking around, and it was just, her family dynamic was so beautiful and just interesting, and pushed my understanding and concept of what a family could be. And so I think as you're looking for this new community and new friendships, finding people who, like, I've really appreciated. I have a close friend who is gay, and what he shares with me about the gay experience is something I never was exposed to as a Mormon. And that really broadens my horizons as far as how I understand the world, how I understand to connect with people who are like him and him. And so I think as you're searching for a community, not being afraid to find friends who push your thinking and who help you be introduced to new concepts and new ideas and help you just broaden your horizons outside of this very kind of traditional type of person who is a bit one size fits all potentially within the church.
We're getting a ton of comments about community that works for different people. There's the Mormon Stories podcast Facebook community that's got over 20,000 members in it. That's a really useful community to some people. And even our YouTube channel, there are people that, as for community, they come on and watch our live streams.
Yeah.
And they talk to each other and get to know each other that way. So many different ways people can find community.
Yes.
It's great.
And then the number one thing is to not hold yourself back, to not lose Mormonism and then replace it with nothing.
Yeah.
So push yourself to get out there. You can even just have, if you're an introvert, like have an online community, have a message board you're a part of, have
Reddit.
one of these Facebook groups. You don't even have to leave your house to find community.
Yeah.
So don't hold yourself back after losing your faith. Put yourself out there and find these people who are waiting for you to belong with them.
Yeah, they say a lone monkey is a dead monkey. Like, we are not made. We are not evolved to be alone.
Yeah.
We're just not. So, or at least few of us are. So that's 9. Did we do 9?
That was 9. We're
Are we
ready
number
for
10 right now?
We're ready.
Are we wrapping up here?
Final point.
Are we going to end with a bang?
Yes. Is the bang the reading? Mm-hmm. Yes.
And yes, it is a bang.
Yeah. So the last point is becoming an ex-ExMormon.
Can I just say, it was John Larson, the podcaster for Mormon Expression, that first introduced
That coined the term?
that term that
Okay.
I'm aware of.
Okay.
So I love the guy, so I just wanted to give him credit.
Okay.
But
Thank you, John Larson.
Yeah.
I love that term because I think it perfectly encapsulates what in my opinion, every ex-Mormon's goal should be, which is to, I think in leaving the church, it's such a hyper-fixated emotional time. And it's really beautiful, I think, when and we talked about this last night, you go through a phase of, you just have Mormon Stories, you're reading CS Letter, you're binging podcasts, you're binging TikTok. You are so consumed by the process of losing your faith and then rebuilding that it becomes almost its own task, almost more demanding than Mormonism because it's so emotionally taxing. And it's really beautiful to be far enough past losing your faith and far enough past this process of grieving your faith that it starts to feel like it's a little bit in the background. It starts to feel like you can go for a day or two without even thinking about Mormonism, without even processing, or feeling angry or frustrated or bitter, but that you're finally ready to just start engaging with your life like it's like I shared in the chapter yesterday, like it's just normal. And you're no longer ruled by Mormonism, but you're also no longer ruled by ex-Mormonism. And you're completely ready to jump off and start in this new life. So I share a few instances of times that even since I've been out for 8 years, that Mormonism still kind of comes into my subconscious, and I can read. I don't know if you wanted me to read the beginning of that chapter about the running, or if I could just describe it, whatever you think.
Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I think it is kind of part of the process for many people, that we have these moments where conditioning may
Kicks
seep
back
in again. And that's kind of part of
While
being
you're
alive.
looking that up, I'll just say one of the most common things that Margie and I face, we'll meet people who used to be listeners to Mormon Stories podcast, and they always apologize and say, sorry, I don't
So
listen
true.
like I quite used to. And we always tell them, we see that as success, like graduation. We're not here to make you addicted to us. We're here to help you through a hard time. And when people tell us that they've graduated from Mormon Stories podcast, we congratulate them.
That's right. We say we're so happy to hear that.
Yeah, not that there's anything wrong with staying interested in Mormonism and staying empathetic or staying connected or just because it's fun or interesting. That's all okay too. But it's also totally okay to move on.
Yeah,
So,
and I think too, part of graduating from ex-Mormondom is also developing. I think everyone should feel a really big sense of pride of just how far they've come And it truly is, I think becoming ex-Mormon, leaving the church, is something everyone should be very proud of. And
it's an achievement.
It's an
To
achievement.
leave a high demand religion or cult that's harming you. That's
and
a
to
massive achievement.
disappoint your family and to choose yourself over choosing what other people want for you. And I've thought a lot about, how many of my ancestors were Mormon and how many of, they crossed the entire country and settled in Utah. And I've thought a lot about how potentially I am letting them down, and that those people, in theory, would be disappointed with what they would see on the screen right now. And I think what I've landed on is that I hope, or in my mind, I like to imagine that they're actually very proud of me, because I think what led them into Mormonism, because when people convert, they let their family down too, is tenacity and resilience and courage.
And truth seeking.
Yeah.
Right?
And that maybe if in the 80s my grandparents or their grandparents had access to the same information that I've had access to, that maybe the desire for truth seeking and the tenacity to follow through with what feels morally good and right and ethical, that they would be proud of me, because I've done what they've done kind of in theory by following what I had a very high conviction for. And so I think part of being an ex-Mormon is to reframe out of, I'm the black sheep, I'm never going to live up to what my parents wanted, but to frame it as, I'm very proud of you, of any listener who's left the church and that was the choice they made, and of myself for being willing to disappoint a lot of people, being willing to make a choice that was counter to the culture of my family in the name of choosing what I felt was the right way to be or to do. And so, sorry.
Did you want to read it?
Yes. So this is the last part of the book. This is the end note, and it comes to the end of the book. So the phrase ex-ex-Mormon has kicked around the internet for a while. When I first heard it, the term immediately resonated with me. It is the promise that someday you'll be unconditionally free from Mormonism and ex-Mormonism. Mormonism is an obsessive headspace, and the deconstruction and emotional demands of becoming ex-Mormon can be even more taxing. I may not yet be at the ex-ex-Mormon stage, but I know many people who are. If an old friend who left the church several years ago knocks on my door and I say, "What is wanted?" when I answer, there's a pause before the laugh of recognition. Mormonism is no longer right at the surface. It is an old memory that requires dusting. In the initial months of leaving the LDS Church, binging podcasts, TikTok, and history books is completely normal. When I first left the church, I wanted to talk about it constantly with everyone I met. Becoming an ex-Mormon is a phase of intense discovery and renegotiation. But after you process the loss of faith, the world opens even further. When you break up with someone you've dated for a while, you probably spend some time staring at their social media accounts, asking friends if they've bumped into your ex, and writing in your journal about the relationship. After some time, you start looking outward again, and suddenly your barista or classmate or coworker is looking awfully cute. When I was a teenager, I thought breakups would break me, and now I can hardly remember names. This is how I view becoming an ex-Mormon. The breakup is over, your heart is free, and you are ready to fall deeply in love with a new life, free from your abusive religion. I hope you become so ex-Mormon this book becomes completely irrelevant to you. I see you picking up this book, thumbing through the pages, and letting out a sigh of recognition. If you are firmly in the ex-Mormon phase of your life, don't lose this book in the back of your closet or donate to the Goodwill Void. Here's what I hope you do instead. Hold on to it and keep it safe. Write your ex-Mormon testimony inside the cover. Wait for the right moment. Inevitably, someone close to you will reach out with some old familiar words. You'll open your phone and see the message. I wanted to reach out to see if you could share more about leaving the church. I've been going through a faith crisis, and it's been incredibly hard. I'm still going to church, but I have little to no faith that any of it is true. I'm struggling, and I'm not sure what to do. Save this book for when you get that message, and along with your conversations and the support I'm sure you'll offer, ask for their address. Send this book to the next person who needs it. I hope as you drop it in the post, there's a smile on your face. The bad breakup is over. Time to fall in love with yourself, your new life, and everything in the world waiting for you. The end.
Mark, you love that. Mm-hmm. Do you want to say why you loved it?
Oh, I feel like it stands on its own.
Yeah.
The optimism, I love the analogy, just worked.
Yeah. Hold that book up again. Tell us what the book is.
This is How to Leave the Mormon Church, an Ex-Mormon's Guide to Rebuilding After Religion by Alyssa Grenfell, with a foreword by Dr. John Dehlin, founder and host of Mormon Stories. And it is a guide to, once you have a faith crisis, asking, what should I do next? And helping you work through some of those questions and giving you ideas on how to solve them.
And I do not get a cut from the book. It's purely because I believe in it and think it'll help people. So right now, please go to the link in the description. Click on that Amazon link, buy this book, buy copies for your friends and family. Let's make this book as ubiquitous or more ubiquitous than the CES letter and Mormon Stories, because really, being an ex-Mormon isn't about hating Joseph Smith. Being an ex-Mormon isn't about tearing down the church. Being an ex-Mormon isn't about being on Reddit or binging ex-Mormon podcasts. It's about creating and living the healthiest, happiest, best life you possibly can. And it's about reconstruction and healing and growth. And that's what this book is trying to nurture. And that's why we felt so passionately about giving Alyssa 8 hours on Mormon Stories to help promote it. So please buy it and support it and share it. Margie, are you holding it up?
Yes.
Does it have the Margie endorsement as well?
Thank you, Alyssa. A gift of a resource. Like,
Thank you.
we honor its birth into the world, and for all the effort, all those early mornings of you writing, sending it out into the void, and then here it is. And it's yeah.
Well, thank you both. And I also wanted to add, I've had actually quite a few people say they want the book, but that they're afraid because they share an Amazon account or some account with their family, that their family will see it. So if that is you, if you want it, but you're worried or nervous that someone might see that you bought it, you can go to my website, which is howtoleavethemormonchurch.com, and email me, and I will help you get a copy that is not as easily trackable as, yes, that's a little more anonymous.
What's your email address?
My email address, it's
For this.
very easy, alyssadgrenfell@gmail.com.
All right. I should also mention your freaking TikTok and YouTube are just blowing up. So we want to tell people about those? Because that's the main reason so many people have joined. They just love your TikTok. So let's make sure you talk about it.
Well, hello to the people from TikTok and YouTube. My name on TikTok is just the same as my email, Alyssa D. Grenfell. And I have, I think, 60 something on TikTok and 40 something on YouTube. And I have it's been so amazing to see. I mean, 6 months ago, I think I had 3,000 or something. So it's been very cool to see the response of people and the direct messages of people sharing that my content or my videos have really connected with them and helped them, and even helped. I think my favorite compliment is just that my videos have helped them feel like they have hope, and that they feel like it was okay that they chose to leave the church and feel validated. And so you can follow me on TikTok or YouTube. You can check out my book if you're wondering more about this process that I've experienced leaving the church. And I really appreciate all of the support from all of the people just commenting and sharing. And I hope my dream for this book has always been, since I wrote it in my notes app when the idea was born, that this can truly become a resource that people turn to when they are in the depths of despair, that they've lost their faith, and that it lifts them up from this horrible place they're in.
Love it. It's a gift, right? It can be a gift.
It's my gift to you.
Yeah.
I hope it's a good one.
So Kara Burrell Nuance Ho entered the comments. She wanted to share that you, Alyssa, are going over to Kara's to record tomorrow.
Yes.
So people should know, if you just haven't gotten enough of Alyssa Grenfell.
There's more.
There's more.
And with Kara.
With Kara's humor and wit and her angle. So we love you, Kara. We love Nuance Ho. Support Nuance Ho. Also want to share this comment from Suzanne. She writes, I'm still in the ex-Mormon phase, so thank you for this content to help me get to my Ex-ExMormon life. Yeah, thanks for the comment. Thanks for the super chat. And I'll just say, please subscribe to this channel. Please like this episode. Please share it with as many people as possible. And we just want to always thank our monthly donors that make Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation possible. And we thank those who throw us a super chat donation here and there, because we pay our staff and we try to pay them generously. And we do that because of the financial support from viewers and listeners like you. So thanks to everyone who makes this content possible. Thanks to Margie. You make this show better and you make me better.
It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful you were here too. I feel like it's so nice to, I don't know. I love all of your takes on the book, and honestly, I think putting a creative project out into the world can be so intimidating. So you've helped me feel a lot more confidence while we've been talking. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And let's make this book a better seller than Joseph Smith's The Book of Mormon, right? Which is trending in that direction, right?
Yes, right now I'm outranking Joseph Smith, so help me keep outranking him.
With those shoulders, you're outranking Joseph Smith? That's outrageous.
I know. I always think that I think the church reports that there's 17 million members of the church currently. So let's sell 17 million copies to all the members.
Then I want to cut. If you sell 17 million copies, no, I'm kidding. All right. Well, thanks, Alyssa Grenfell. Keep up the good work. Do you plan on launching a YouTube channel, like, more formally? Do you know yet?
I've been really focused on the short TikTok videos, but I'm hoping to branch out and become a little bit more established in longer form content. I'd love to interview people like you guys do and talk more about some, I think people love just the explanations of some of the doctrines. Like I just did a video about the Garden of Eden, or, Adam and Diamond. People, I think, Mormon and ex-Mormon and never Mormon, find this stuff super fascinating. So follow me definitely there, and I'm excited to keep making some of the longer form videos that delve more deeply into these topics. And
tell me, this would be the last question I ask. In your TikTok, sometimes you dress up in Mormon temple clothes. That's viewed by many as like super blasphemous, awful. I bet you've thought that through. I bet you have a reason for doing that. Yeah, and I have some videos addressing those comments. The first is I look more critically at the Mormon Church because I think it does a lot of harm, specifically, like we talked about yesterday, and even today. I think that the Mormon Church asks for a lot of respect because it's a religion, but it also doesn't give respect to a lot of people. And so I think things that ask for respect but aren't respectful don't deserve unconditional deference and respect, but deserve to be criticized. And so as far as the temple clothing goes and the temple explanations, I make those to give first some criticism and explanation, but also because I believe that any investigator who is ever choosing to join the church should be given that information. I think that the idea that someone would join the church and have no idea that the temple ceremony takes place, that kids will be baptized and sing, "I love to see the temple, I'm going there someday," and have no idea what takes place in the temple, despite the fact that the temple is the penultimate ritual of, the endowment is the most important ritual of Mormonism, is unethical. I think ultimately it is unethical to expect people to join without having any sort of information about that. And so I don't inherently think that information is disrespectful. I understand that some people might be offended, and I would never meet a Mormon and make fun of their garments or ask to see them or ask if they're wearing them. One-on-one, I don't think anyone should ever be disrespectful to another human being, Mormon or non-Mormon. But ideas like Mormonism, dogmas like Mormonism, organizations like Mormonism, I don't believe are beyond reproach. I think that criticism is part of, I think criticism is deserved when an organization does not respect everyone in the same way it demands respect. Yeah, love it. All right, Alyssa Grenfell, thanks again. It's great to have you. We look forward to seeing you skyrocket.
That's right.
Thank you.
Wishing you all the best.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining us today on Mormon Stories podcast. We love all our listeners, all our viewers, and we appreciate all our staff, whether it's Maven or Julia or Gerardo, Brooklyn, Margie, our board of directors. We couldn't do all this without our staff and without the support, and all our fellow co-hosts like Nemo and Mike and Julia and others. I'm sure I'm forgetting people, but thanks for joining us today. Tune in next time. We've got great stuff coming up. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. Bye, everybody.